Mr. Yi, Miss Su has returned from Northern Myanmar. Northern Myanmar is purgatory. Either you take off or you die. Su Qingwan hugged the waist of the Northern Myanmar boss, took the third way, fought back, and escaped. Chapter 1, Deep in Northern Myanmar. Su Qingwan, someone is here to redeem you. Come with me. The heavy iron door opened, and bright light flooded in, stabbing at her eyes. Su Qingwan endured the discomfort and stood up excitedly. She hadn't eaten all day, feeling dizzy, and hastily grabbed the wall to steady herself. Hurry up, stop dawdling. The man ordered menacingly. Su Qingwan staggered as she followed him upstairs. When they reached the office door, she heard her fiancé's voice. 100 million per person, I'll take her. Su Qingwan pushed the door open excitedly. Jin Qian, I knew you'd come to save me. Before she could finish her sentence, she saw Li Jin Qian holding her younger sister, Su Lin, in his arms. Su Lin was crying, her clothes in disarray, and her exposed skin bruised. Seeing Su Qingwan, Su Lin shuddered and fearfully hid deeper into Li Jin Qian's arms. Sister, don't hit me. I don't like Tian Ji anymore. I don't want mom and dad either. I want to fight for the position of the eldest daughter of the Su family. Don't hit me. It hurts so much, Tian Ji, save me. Li Jin Qian gently hugged Su Lin, kissing her dirty forehead to comfort her. Don't be afraid, baby. I won't let her hurt you again. Li Jin Qian looked at Su Qingwan, his eyes sharp as knives. Su Qingwan, the Su family raised you for 20 years, trained you to be a talent, and you repay them with ingratitude. You tricked Lin Lin into coming to Northern Myanmar and sold her to scammers. As expected, a child born of bad blood carries the taint. You disgust me. Su Qingwan was completely taken aback. Her usually obedient and close sister, Su Lin, had framed her. It's not like that. Su Lin told me she wanted to write her graduation thesis, and wanted to ride the wave of Northern Myanmar's popularity. She begged me to bring her here. Before she could finish, Su Lin's crying interrupted her. Tian Ji, don't blame sister. It was I who begged her to bring me here. I sold her to them myself. These injuries were caused by me. The men who tried to rape me were also brought by me. It has nothing to do with sister. In an instant, Li Jin Qian's gaze became so sharp it felt like it could pierce through Su Qingwan's heart. I didn't. Su Qingwan tried to explain, but before she could speak, a heavy slap landed on her face. Her whole body was knocked to the ground, her ears ringing, the taste of blood in her mouth. Su Qingwan covered her face, staring at the man she had loved for 10 years. For the first time, she felt how strange, how heartless, and how terrifying he was. You believe her and not me? Su Qingwan asked, holding back tears. Li Jin Qian sneered, after all this, you still have no remorse. I barely slapped you, and you pretended to faint. It's clear you've been bullying Lin Lin in private, pretending to be pitiful to make us misunderstand her. Su Qingwan felt like her heart was being torn apart, full of grievance. I didn't do it. Please believe me. Li Jin Qian didn't even want to waste another word with her. He turned to the person in charge and said, I'll give you an extra 10 million. Let her suffer a little, but don't kill her. The person in charge didn't expect that they would receive such a large sum of money without having to scam anyone, and grinned with squinted eyes. Don't worry, Mr. Li, torturing people is my specialty, especially when it's a delicate beauty like this. Li Jin Qian nodded, holding Su Lin as he walked up to Su Qingwan, looking down at her with contempt. Su Qingwan, adults must take responsibility for their actions. You dared to trick Lin Lin into Northern Myanmar, now you know the consequences. With that, he turned and walked away with Su Lin. Su Qingwan was in a daze, unable to believe that Li Jin Qian was going to leave her in Northern Myanmar. She hastily grabbed his pant leg. Jin Qian, you can't do this to me. Li Jin Qian kicked her away, leaving her with the cold, unfeeling sight of his back. Su Qingwan crawled after him, shouting, I want to contact my parents. This is also what your parents want. Don't forget, Su Lin is their real daughter. Compared to your real parents, what are you, an adopted daughter? Li Jin Qian quickened his pace, and in the blink of an eye, he reached the stairs, about to walk out the door. Su Qingwan got up and chased after him, not caring for her life. Jin Qian, don't leave me. She ran too fast, tears blurring her vision, and couldn't see the path, tumbling down the stairs with a loud thud. The world spun, and she collided with a hard object, finally stopping. Warm blood flowed down her forehead and along her cheek. Su Qingwan didn't care about the pain. All she knew was that if she didn't catch up with Li Jinqian, her life would be over. She got up and chased after him with all her might. Seeing Li Jinqian and Su Lin get into the luxury car parked at the door, Su Qingwan rushed to grab Li Jinqian's clothes. Just as she was about to touch him, one of Li Jinqian's bodyguards kicked her away. Her body lost balance, and she crashed onto the hard concrete floor. Su Qingwan ignored the pain, using her hands and feet to crawl toward Li Jinqian. "Jinqian, don't leave me." The bodyguard stepped on her ankle, and she struggled like a helpless ant, unable to move an inch. Su Lin snuggled in Li Jinqian's arms, weakly saying, "Tianji, sister is just jealous that you like me. She didn't mean to have those men rape me. Take sister with you." Li Jinqian held Su Lin tighter, affectionately kissing her lips. "Silly girl, you're so kind. Do you know what Northern Myanmar is like? If I had come a step later, those dogs would have ravaged you." Since Su Qingwan set up this whole play, let her finish the show herself. With that, he made a gesture, and the bodyguard shut the car door. Seeing Li Jinqian about to leave, Su Qingwan struggled even more desperately. "Jinqian, I don't love you anymore. I promise I'll call off the engagement. I'll leave the Su family and never come back. Please, don't leave. Please." She couldn't move. She could only get up, kneel, and beg him. No matter how she pleaded, the luxurious car left without a second thought. The bodyguard released her cuff, and without thinking, Su Qingwan chased after them. She knew that Li Jinqian was her only hope to leave this place. She couldn't give up. "Jinqian." She screamed his name, her voice hoarse. Inside the car, Li Jinqian looked at the crazed woman behind them and coldly ordered, "Drive faster." The car sped up, leaving the park's iron gates without a trace of hesitation. Su Qingwan, seeing the car leaving, was caught by the park's personnel. The iron gates closed again, and several locks were sealed. Despair engulfed her like a tidal wave. In an instant, she felt like a hollowed-out puppet, losing all her strength. Her face slowly slid down against the metal door, leaving a long blood stain. Lying on the ground, her empty gaze was fixed on the sky washed by the rain, which was a clear blue. But all she saw was an endless abyss. In her ears, she could hear the voices of the park staff. "I didn't expect we'd get to see a tragic love drama. The plot's pretty good." I almost cried. "Manager, what should we do with this woman? She's a high achiever, has looks, and a good figure. She's definitely a talent. Let us send her to Brother Lee. As long as Brother Lee is satisfied, we'll be waiting for promotions, wealth, and wives." The men's laughter was wild, like blades slicing through her body. It hurt so much. Chapter 2, Northern Myanmar is Hell. Su Wanqing had her hands bound and was dragged out of the car like livestock. The hood was roughly removed from her head, and she finally realized they were in a desolate mountain wilderness. Around her were several other people bound just like her, a girl and 3 men. The girl had dyed golden hair, fair skin, a beautiful face, and an alluring figure. She was dressed in a strapless bodycon dress, exuding sensuality. When she noticed Su Wanqing looking at her, the girl forced a smile, more hideous than crying. "Hello, I'm Yuan. Shut up, no talking." The man carrying an AK pointed at their heads as a warning. Su Wanqing's heart nearly leaped from her chest as she stared at the dark muzzle of the gun, terrified to say another word. After traveling half a day along the mountain path, Su Wanqing finally saw a massive building. The structure was dark in color, looming ominously amidst the rolling green hills, evoking an inexplicable sense of dread. With a clang, a heavy iron gate was opened from the inside. Several fully armed men came out, exchanged words with those who had brought them, and then led them inside. They crossed a yard of several dozen meters and arrived at the entrance of a building, where the words "prison" were written above the door. A prison. Su Wanqing hesitated for a moment, and before she could think further, an electric baton struck her back, making her stagger. "Ugly witch, move faster." The pain took her breath away, but she dared not delay. She braced herself and hurried to follow Yuan ahead. She was ugly, but after the injuries and rolling in the muddy pit earlier, she hadn't had the chance to clean herself. Having gone days without a bath, she reeked and was covered in dirt. Her hair was matted together, covering half her face, making her look terrible. The building inside was circular, 5 stories tall, with rows of small rooms on either side. Behind the steel doors, people were pressing against the bars, banging on the metal, causing a loud clanging noise. A beauty has arrived. It's been ages since anyone pretty came here. We don't want money, we want women. The men screamed crazily, their voices echoing through the air. Su Wanqing nearly lost her balance from fear. The guide led them up a metal staircase that spiraled around the circular building. As they ascended, they passed by the rooms, where men leered at them and made obscene gestures. Shouting, "Blonde beauty, Big Brother likes you, come over here and let me take care of you." Yuan, terrified, ran ahead, but just a few steps in, a hand from another room grabbed her hair. No. Let go of me. Yuan screamed in panic and struggled. The more she screamed, the more excited the men became, howling with pleasure. One of them started tearing at Yuan's clothes, and she was about to be stripped naked. Suddenly, a commanding voice echoed down from upstairs. "Enough, Brother Li wants you to bring them up quickly." Su Wanqing looked up to see a handsome young man standing on the 5th floor. He wore a black casual outfit, light fabric flowing with the breeze, as if moving of its own accord. His features were sharp and noble, tall and dignified, as though he had stepped out of a comic book. He didn't belong in this dirty world. The disgusting men seemed to be afraid of the young man, reluctantly letting go of Yuan. They ascended to the 5th floor and, under the young man's guidance, entered an office. Inside, countless US dollars were stacked into the shape of transformers, ships, animals, and other strange structures. A young man dressed in brand name casual clothing was lazily swinging his legs on the desk. He had narrow eyes, a lean, malnourished frame, and a rat-like appearance. But his small eyes glinted with a cold, terrifying sharpness. Su Wanqing couldn't bear to look at him for long, quickly averting her gaze. The man jumped off the desk and walked toward them. "I'm Li, your boss. I have another nickname, God. Those who trust me will rise to fame and fortune, those who don't, die. Do you understand?" None of the 5 dared to respond. Li stood before Su Wanqing. "What's your name?" "Su Wanqing," she answered in a trembling voice. "Do you know what kind of work we do?" "Fraud." "Louder." "Fraud," Su Wanqing raised her voice. Li laughed and turned to the handsome man beside him. "Yizun, the new girl is pretty smart. Though fraud doesn't sound nice. From now on, we'll say we're doing charity. We help the rich idiots spend their money, so they won't haunt us when they die without spending it all, right?" Su Wanqing didn't dare nod or shake her head. She stared at her toes, biting her lower lip in fear. Just as she stood there in silence, Li grabbed her long hair. Her whole body was dragged roughly out of the room and slammed onto the desk. A sharp knife was held to her fingers. Li's cold breath brushed her ear. "Understand now." Su Wanqing swallowed her scream and, trembling, replied, "Understood." Li released her, and she collapsed weakly on the floor, trying to get up, but her hands and feet were too weak. Finally, Yizun stepped forward to help her up. Li teased, "Yizun, you like her?" Yizun shook his head and remained silent. TSK. This is the first time you've helped a woman up. I thought you weren't interested in women." Li rested his arm on Yizun's shoulder, staring at his eyes teasingly. "Buddy, although she's dirty and stinky, at least she's alive and female. After a wash, she should be usable. Turn off the lights and just find a hole to crawl into. Don't be so picky." "I'm not interested in women." Yizun's voice was cold, with a metallic edge. His tone was firm, not to be questioned. "So how do you take care of your personal needs?" Li's eyes gleamed, clearly curious. Yizun turned his face away, not responding. Li shrugged. "All right then, if you ever like a girl, even if it's your sister-in-law, I'll deliver her to your bed." Yizun walked straight to the door, away from Li. Li, having been ignored, turned his attention back to Su Wanqing and the others. "I'll say the rules once. You have to hit 50,000 in sales to get a commission. 100,000 can let you send a message to your family. 2 million allows you to have your own phone. The higher the sales, the higher the commission. Our goal is to make money. Got it?" Su Wanqing and the others responded loudly. Li patted Su Wanqing's shoulder with satisfaction. I heard you're a top student, I'm counting on you. Go for it. Su Wanqing felt like the place where he patted her was as if a snake had crawled over it, causing her skin to crawl. Yizun led them out. A strong man jogged over and handed him a cigarette, lighting it obediently. Zun bro, I've got my eye on this blonde girl. Can you give her to me? I still need someone in my room. Yizun raised an eyebrow. Wasn't your room already full? I just kicked someone out, still need one. Fu Kuei's gaze swept over Yuan lecherously. Yuan, frightened, hid behind Su Wanqing. Yizun threw the cigarette butt into a trash bin, blocking Fu Kuei with his body. We're a legitimate charity, not thugs. If you like her, go chase her. If you dare to act like a thug, I'll make sure to cut off your little 2 pounds and make you soak them in wine. Fu Kuei thought Yizun was protecting Yuan because he liked her, so he shifted his attention to Su Wanqing. If the blonde doesn't work, this one will do. I'm not picky. Chapter 3, Li Jinqian, I don't want you anymore. Su Qingwan instinctively grabbed onto Yizun and pleaded, please don't give me to him, I beg you. Yizun disdainfully shook off Su Qingwan's hand and replied coldly, this won't work either. After being rejected twice and holding his anger for too long, Fu Kuei's temper flared instantly. Yizun, don't think that because Brother Li values you, you can do whatever you want. My performance this month is still short by 50,000. It's only 200,000. According to the rules, I can pick anyone I want to bring to my room, and I'll see what you can do to stop me when that time comes. Fu Kuei shot Yizun a fierce glare before storming off, releasing all his anger in his steps, as if he wanted to stomp holes into the ground. Yizun led Su Qingwan and the others downstairs and pointed to the innermost room. You can stay here. Su Qingwan glanced inside, seeing 4 men in bunk beds. Some were lying down, others sitting, and some were leering at them, their eyes filled with hunger. The looks they gave her were like those of starving wolves, ready to pounce and devour them whole. Su Qingwan's legs turned to jelly at the sight. I don't want this. Mr. Yizun, please, can you give us a different room? Yuan, who had been frightened by what happened earlier, nodded in agreement but couldn't speak. Yizun didn't give them a chance to say more and ordered the 3 men, follow me. Su Qingwan instinctively tried to chase after Yizun, but the man who came out of the room grabbed her wrist and dragged her inside. Ar! Su Qingwan's face turned pale, and she screamed with her eyes tightly shut. Baby, you scream so sweetly. Give me a few more screams. The man's hot breath hit her forehead, and she immediately covered her mouth, eyes wide open as she looked at the muscular man before her. He was shirtless, and his well-toned muscles shook with every movement. Su Qingwan felt that with one punch, he could kill her. I'm Zhang Qiang, a former boxing champion. I'm gentle with women, don't be scared. Su Qingwan froze, her back pressed against the cold wall, afraid to even breathe. Zhang Qiang looked at Su Qingwan from head to toe with a wicked smile. The moment you appeared, I could tell you have the perfect body for beauty. Once you're cleaned up, you'll definitely be a stunner. Stick with me, and no one will dare touch you. He reached out to touch her hair. At the last moment, Yuan suddenly lunged at Zhang Qiang. Qiangji, I like you, hug me. She knelt at his feet, leaned in, and started undoing his belt. Any man would lose control at such a provocative gesture. Zhang Qiang yanked Yuan up, threw her onto the lower bunk, and with bloodshot eyes, pounced on her. You little seductress, you're driving me crazy. Then, Yuan's scream echoed, and the sound of the bed creaking filled the room. Loud, mocking laughter erupted from the men outside the room. That lucky Zhang Qiang, Yizun is too biased. 2 newcomers finally arrive, and he doesn't even send them to our rooms. Su Qingwan's eyes widened as she watched Yuan being violated. The suffocating feeling surged, and she thought she might die from the horror. Leaning against the wall, Su Qingwan slowly squatted down, burying her face in her knees, clutching her head and trying to block out the unspeakable sounds. The Northern Myanmar region was hell. More terrifying than any movie or any account from someone who escaped it. The cursing, mocking, and filthy sexual words mixed with the panting of men and women sounded like vengeful spirits coming to claim their lives. Su Qingwan screamed in unbearable agony. Who would come to rescue her? The bed finally stopped shaking, and someone pulled her twice. She lifted her head from her knees, her eyes blurred with tears, just able to make out Yuan Yuan's face. Yuan Yuan had gotten dressed and gestured for her to follow. Su Qingwan stood up, but after squatting for so long, her legs were numb, and she stumbled to the ground. A strong arm reached out and wrapped around her waist. "Thank you." Before she could finish her words, she saw Zhang Qiang's mocking face. "Don't touch me," Su Qingwan screamed through her tears and ran out the door. She didn't know where she was going, she only knew she needed to escape. Escape this hell on earth. Suddenly, she collided with a solid wall of flesh. Her body bounced back, and she fell to the ground. Su Qingwan looked up and saw Yi Zun's handsome, cold face above her. He exuded a chilling aura, his gaze toward her as if he were looking at a dead person. "It's too noisy, can you be quiet?" Yi Zun spoke slowly, without any inflection, like a venomous snake slithering through her heart. Su Qingwan covered her mouth, no longer daring to cry. "Please, give me a different room. I don't want to be with those demons." She knew that even if she escaped this time, she wouldn't escape the next time. Zhang Qiang and the men in the room might pounce on her in the next moment. "Here's a 5-star suite. Do you want to stay in it?" Yi Zun looked down at her, his sharp features cast in shadow, cold as an ice sculpture. Su Qingwan nodded desperately. "I want it. 200 million in performance. Do you have that?" "I do. Please, let me make a call. I'll contact my fiancé. He'll send the money, no matter the amount." Su Qingwan saw a glimmer of hope for survival and crawled to her feet, looking at Yi Zun with pleading eyes. "Okay, I'll give you one chance." Yi Zun took his phone from his pocket and handed it to Su Qingwan. Su Qingwan stretched out her dirty hand and carefully held the phone. This was her only hope, the hope to get out. She knew the opportunity was once in a lifetime. She used half a minute to think about what to say to Li Jinqian. She could admit that all of this was her fault, or even break up with him, as long as she could leave here. Nothing else mattered. Su Qingwan tremblingly dialed the familiar number. The call went through, and Li Jinqian's impatient voice came from the other side. "Su Qingwan, you'd better have something big to interrupt me right now, or else." "Or else what?" Although he didn't say it, Su Qingwan knew he would make her wish she were dead. Even dying would be better than being here. "Jinqian, please save me. I'm about to die. Please, take me back. I'll listen to you from now on. I won't fight for anything with Su Lin anymore." At that moment, Su Lin's delicate voice came through. "Brother Qian, was it sister who called? She's amazing, she can still make calls from Northern Myanmar. Those people really treat her well." Her words almost explicitly implied that Su Qingwan was one of them in Northern Myanmar. Li Jinqian sneered on the other end, "Su Qingwan, you really have some skills." Then he directly hung up the phone. For a moment, Su Qingwan felt her mind go blank. She quickly dialed back. It rang twice, then the phone was turned off. She had always thought that Li Jinqian had misunderstood her, and that once he cooled down, everything would be fine. But she never expected him to be so heartless. She had loved him for 10 years, cooked and cleaned for him, and together they built his family's small business into one of the leading multinational smart tech companies. There might not have been love, but there was at least familial bond. He wouldn't have just stood by and let her die. But it turned out that to him, she was nothing. 10 years of love was just her own delusion. A dream that never came true. In an instant, Su Qingwan felt like a hollow puppet, weakly leaning against the corridor railing. The phone she had fought so hard to get dropped to the floor and landed on her foot, but the pain she felt was in her heart. She pressed her hand against her chest, looked up at the ceiling, and laughed softly. She mocked herself, for being self-righteous, for being overly sentimental. She mocked how her 10 years of sacrifice were wasted. As she laughed, her laughter turned into a bitter sob, tears streaming down her face. Everyone came out and looked at her. They saw a kind of desperate hopelessness of death in her. Suddenly, Su Qingwan saw her deceased mother standing below, waving at her. Just like when she was little, her mother would come to pick her up from school. "Li Jinqian, I'm going to find my mother now. I don't want you anymore." She climbed over the railing and jumped. Chapter 4. She doesn't want to die. Su Qingwan's body felt weightless and she did not feel any falling. The collar of her dress was so tight that it almost broke her neck. Before I could think of anything, my body was lifted back from outside the railing by a powerful force and thrown to the ground. Su Qingwan lay on the ground retching. I can't even die. The unprecedented feeling of helplessness broke down her last line of defense. She curled up in pain, huddled against the wall, and shivered. Suddenly, the chin was clamped and the face covered by hair was forced to lift up. Through the gaps in his hair, I could see Yi Zun's noble and arrogant face. Here, everyone's life belongs to Brother Li. As long as Brother Li doesn't let you die, you have to live. After saying this, Yi Zun grabbed her collar and dragged her through the corridor like a dog. Su Qingwan's buttocks and legs hurt from hitting the ground, but she was numb and didn't react. Yi Zun threw her into a dirty bathroom, turned on the water and filled a basin with it. Su Qingwan didn't know what he was going to do. It doesn't matter anyway. There is no greater sorrow than a dead heart. She doesn't want to live anymore. The wash basin was full of water. Yi Zun looked back, grabbed her, and pressed her head into the wash basin. In an instant, tap water with the smell of disinfectant rushed into her nostrils and mouth. The lungs and the entire chest cavity are in excruciating pain. The pain made her brain clear up. She didn't want to die. She hadn't lived enough. She began to struggle and kick. Yi Zun's grip was too strong, and she couldn't struggle after just a little pressure. Just as he was about to drown, he suddenly let go of his hands. Su Qingwan slipped to the ground, coughing violently and spitting out mouthfuls of water. Through tearful eyes, Su Qingwan saw Yi Zun squatting down and staring into her eyes. Do you want to die again? No. Su Qingwan answered without thinking. Next time you want to die, tell me. Yi Zun smiled, and that smile was harmless. Su Qingwan felt that it was the smile of the god of death, and the god of death was waving at her. Yi Zun stood up and washed his hands, wash them, eat, and have training in the afternoon. Okay. Su Qingwan was scared to death of Yi Zun. I don't know why. She feels that Yi Zun is scarier than anyone else here. Yi Zun walked to the door, suddenly looked back and said, "Hide this face of yours." Su Qingwan touched her face, got up and stood in front of the mirror. She found that her hair was wet and parted from her forehead, revealing her beautiful face completely. Li Jinqian once praised this face. One glance can conquer a city, and another glance can conquer a country. If the men here knew, she would be living a life worse than death. Su Qingwan immediately pulled her hair down to cover half of her face. Yuan came in and locked the door. He took off his clothes in front of Su Qingwan, and her delicate body was covered with purple marks. You don't have to think about it to know that it's very painful and miserable. Su Qingwan turned her face away, unable to bear to look a second time. Before, why did you help me? At the beginning, Zhang Qiang targeted Su Qingwan. If Yuan hadn't run up to Zhang Qiang and pestered him, the one who was raped would have been Su Qingwan. Who said I would help you? Zhang Qiang is the strongest person in our room. Only the weak can survive by relying on the strong. I heard that you are a top student, but you don't even know how to protect yourself. Have you wasted all these years of studying? Su Qingwan lowered her head. I won't commit suicide. No matter what, you saved me. Then you must always remember me, and take me with you when you run away. Su Qingwan was startled. How did you know? You scholars have 800 minds. I'm not very smart, so I can only follow you. Yuan adapted quickly and actually sang, "In the Fields of Hope." You overestimate me. Not only am I not smart, I'm also stupid. I was played around by men and my sister. Everyone has a dark history. Don't dwell on your mistakes. I'm telling you the truth. I have a hunch that you can take me out. Yuan didn't wait for Su Qingwan to answer and continued humming a song while taking a bath. After taking a shower and going to eat, Su Qingwan was still wearing dirty clothes. Yuan was standing in line behind her and her slender waist was touched by a short man. Yuan looked back and slapped the man. I am Brother Qiang's person, how dare you touch me? Just as the man was about to fight back, he felt the pressure from Zhang Qiang and was so scared that he dared not say a word. When Su Qingwan was holding the plate and reaching for the fruit, she was slapped in the face by the person handing out the fruit. Fruit costs money, ugly. The man was disgusted by touching Su Qingwan's dirt, so he immediately took out a clean towel and wiped his hands vigorously. Su Qingwan looked at the back of her red hand, hurriedly took the plate, and ran to the corner to eat. Zhang Qiang and Yuan came and sat next to her. Zhang Qiang introduced the environment here to Yuan. This is an abandoned prison that was rented by our boss. Although our charity is managed by one boss, it is divided into 3 areas. We are in the 3rd district. As long as we can achieve 200 million in sales, we can move to the 2nd district. 200 million. If it were outside, Su Qingwan would find it easy, but here it was an astronomical figure. Well, it is said that everyone in the 2nd district has a private room, and the room also has a bathroom and so on. What about the 1st district? Yuan didn't even eat, she was so curious. The total sales of District 1 is over 500 million. It is said that they all live in 5-star suites. They can have beautiful women and meet their families. Zhang Qiang showed an envious look. I must work hard to climb up and become a superior person. Yuan said, scammers are the best. What do you know? For small people like us, we fight a fist fight and lose half our lives for a few $1,000s. Here, we can reach the pinnacle of life without being exposed to the wind and sun, and we can also have a beauty like you. What's wrong with that? Zhang Qiang held Yuan in his arms and kissed her in public, announcing his success. People around whistled, screamed, and banged the table. Brother Qiang, give us a live performance. Come on. Everyone was boiling. Fu Kuei wanted Yuan but was stopped by Yi Zun. Now she is got by Zhang Qiang and he does it in front of him. He was so angry that he flew into a rage and threw the plate towards Su Qingwan. Fu Kuei couldn't beat Zhang Qiang, so he could only go crazy where he was. Damn it, bitch, you'd better not fall into my hands, otherwise, I will make your life worse than death. Yuan hooked her arms around Zhang Qiang's neck and sat on his lap. Brother Qiang, I'm scared. Don't be afraid, I'm here, he won't dare touch you. Zhang Qiang was aroused by Yuan twisting her body in his arms. In addition, men all have a competitive spirit. The angrier Fu Kuei became, the more interested he became, and he directly pushed Yuan onto the dining table. Su Qingwan saw the despair in Yuan's eyes. She stood up, picked up the plate, and smashed it on Zhang Qiang's head. Zhang Qiang had a muscular body, so he didn't feel any pain at all after being hit. But his anger level was maxed out, his bloodshot eyes turned half a circle and fell on Su Qingwan. Su Qingwan, you are looking for death. Chapter 5, Hell is Empty. Before Zhang Qiang could take any action, Yuan pounced on Su Qingwan and slapped her in the face. Who allowed you to hit my man? You are jealous that Brother Qiang likes me, so you are sabotaging me. You are so sinister. If you have the guts, fight me. If you can beat me, I will give Brother Qiang to you. Zhang Qiang, who was about to take action, instantly lost his anger when he saw 2 women fighting over him. The corners of his mouth curled up with a hint of pride, and he said to the people next to him, "Oh, your Brother Qiang, my damn charm." After Su Qingwan received a slap in the face, her mind finally cleared up as to what she had just done, and her heart started beating wildly with fear. She covered her face, turned and ran away. The only empty place in this place is the bathroom. Su Qingwan rushed in, locked the door, leaned against the wall, and looked at the ceiling in despair. She knew that Yuan's today would be her tomorrow. There are no laws, no morals, and no ethics here. There is only filth, power, beatings, fraud, disgust. Hell is empty, the devil is in Northern Myanmar. What should she do? Who can help her? However, God could not hear her pleas. She just wanted to find a quiet place to lick her wounds. God didn't let her off. Knock knock, knock knock knock. There was a knock on the door and Su Qingwan shuddered with fright. Who? She almost screamed. Training, you have 3 seconds to come out. Yi Zun's voice without a trace of warmth came from outside the door. Su Qingwan almost jumped up from the ground and opened the door. I'm coming out. Yi Zun didn't even look at her and turned away. Su Qingwan followed behind him. He was tall and had long legs, so she had to jog to catch up with him. I went up to the 5th floor and entered a hall. There is a long table inside that can seat 20 or 30 people. In front of the table, there is a simple blackboard with some incomprehensible numbers written on it. Su Qingwan felt that this should be the performance figure of the planned fraud. There were only 5 newcomers attending. Yi Zun stood in the main seat, his face cold and arrogant, exuding an aura that said, "Keep away from strangers." Sit down. Yi Zun's voice was soft, but powerful. They all sat upright in unison. Yi Zun came over and handed each of them a few documents. This is the most basic speech technique for our charity. You will be given half a day to memorize it and start working in the afternoon. After he finished speaking, without waiting for them to continue, Yizun turned around and left. After Yizun left, no one spoke. Everyone focused on their words, trying to memorize them within half a day. Su Qingwan read it once and threw it on the table. I walked to the window, opened the curtains, and found that it was not the outside world but the prison. In other words, Li can see the whole scene from his office. Who did what? It was all under Li's nose. Prison, the rooms are completely closed. If they wanted to run, the only exit was the gate they came in through. Except for eating, they usually don't go to the first floor. The possibility of running while eating is zero. Plus, when we arrived, there were so many security guards with AKs outside the door. Su Qingwan felt heavy in her heart and felt that she had no way out. She returned to her seat, leaned back in her chair, and closed her eyes. I drew a map in my mind of what I saw when I came here. In Li's office, a 360-degree camera with no blind spots was focused on Su Qingwan and the others. He crossed his legs, a cigarette in his mouth, and pointed at Su Qingwan on the screen. Yeshuan, this woman won't live long. Yizun took a glance and said nothing. I spent 800,000 yuan, and I definitely can't let her die. Go contact them and see if anyone is willing to take over for 1 million yuan. Yizun went out and made a few phone calls. Brother Li, I've contacted them. They want to see the person in person before they are willing to offer a price. Li narrowed his eyes, staring at Su Qingwan on the screen, a bloodthirsty smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. In the blink of an eye, half a day passed. The door of the conference room was pushed open. Su Qingwan opened her eyes and saw Li and Yizun coming in. Everyone stood up in fear. Hello, Brother Li, hello, Brother Zun. Li watched the surveillance video in the office for a whole day and found out that Su Qingwan had only flipped through the script at the beginning and hadn't even looked at it until now. He put his hands in his trouser pockets and walked in front of Su Qingwan. Ms. Su, please recite the first one. Su Qingwan blurted out without thinking. Hello, we are from the police station. We have the ID card you took. We can send it to you. You just need to pay for the courier. Li didn't expect that she could actually recite it. He was really surprised and lit a cigarette. Continue. Su Qingwan memorized several pages of script word for word in one breath without any hesitation. Li laughed loudly and said to Yizun, you top students, academic masters, do you all have the ability to remember everything you see? Yizun replied, I don't have this ability. Li was upset and hooked Su Qingwan's shoulders with one hand. Student master, now is the time to prove your ability. Li took out an old-fashioned mobile phone and placed it in front of Su Qingwan. Just make a random call and test the waters. You want to change rooms, right? If you succeed, I'll change it for you. Su Qingwan has never done anything deceptive, but she has worked in sales. At that time, Li Jinqian's family owned a small company that was about to go bankrupt. She developed the new type of drone. No one bought it at first, so she was the one who made many phone calls to promote it. After contacting the client, Li Jinqian went outside to talk. Su Qingwan mistook the scam call as a sales call and dialed a random number. The technical department monitored the call and tracked the location of the call. Su Qingwan turned on the speakerphone and after a few rings, an old woman's voice came from the other end. Hello? Who is this? Su Qingwan said calmly, Hello, we are from the Public Security Bureau. Your son was caught for prostitution. Please bring your daughter-in-law to pay the fine and claim the son. Before Su Qingwan finished speaking, the old woman said anxiously, Comrade police, please don't call and tell my daughter-in-law. If my daughter-in-law finds out, she will divorce my son. I'm sorry, we are formal unit and family members must come in person. Unless the matter is handled online, they don't have to come in person. The old woman asked excitedly, how do we handle this online? You only need to pay a 5,000 yuan fine, and your son can go home tonight. If you can't pay, you should go to the police station and tell them. Family disgrace should not be made public. The old woman was afraid that outsiders would know and tell her daughter-in-law, so she dared not go to the police station. I'll pay you, please don't tell my daughter-in-law. Li immediately sent an account. Su Qingwan read out a string of numbers for the account number. When I was about to say the last number, I heard the old woman crying. She couldn't get over it and hung up the phone. In an instant, the entire conference room fell into deathly silence. Su Qingwan turned to look at Li Li. I'm sorry, I can't do it. Li Li smiled and said, if you can't do it, I'll cut off 2 of your fingers. After he finished speaking, he bent down and took out a hammer from under the table. Chapter 6, Night Search. Su Qingwan realized the danger and turned around and ran. Before she took a step forward, Li Li grabbed her hair, dragged her whole body back violently, and threw her to the ground. Su Qingwan propped herself up immediately, but someone stepped on her wrist. Before she could react, she saw Li Li raising a hammer and smashing it down on her fingers. R. After a scream, she was in so much pain that she could no longer make any sound. Her fingers were connected to her heart, and it felt as if it was smashed by a hammer, causing her whole body to twitch in pain. Even so, Li Li did not let her go. He raised the hammer and continued to hit her hand. Su Qingwan's pupils dilated as she watched the hammer fall. At the critical moment, a hand grabbed the hammer. Brother Li, your hand is broken and worthless. Yizun reminded calmly. Li Li cursed and loosened his grip on the hammer. He kicked Su Qingwan and said, lock her in the dark room. Contact her and let her come quickly. I'll give her a 20% discount and sell her to you. Yizun dropped the hammer, grabbed Su Qing by the collar and dragged her into the small dark room. The door opened and closed, the light disappeared, and it was pitch dark. Su Qingwan curled up on the ground, touching her little finger and ring finger. The bones were broken. If you touch it, it will hurt like hell. Big beads of sweat rolled down Su Qingwan's forehead, half from pain and half from fear. She closed her eyes in exhaustion. Li Jinqian, you said you would make my life worse than death, and you did it. Locked in a small dark room, with no food to eat and no water to drink. The endless darkness was like a giant hand, holding her tightly. Can't break free, can't escape. Su Qingwan was cut off from water and food for a day and a night, and then the door was opened. The bright light was blinding, so she closed her eyes and waited for a while to adjust before opening them. Yizun brought in the food and placed it in front of her. Su Qingwan was so hungry that she was almost going crazy. She got up, picked up the chopsticks and started to eat voraciously. In 2 minutes, all the food on the plate was finished. The result of eating too fast is stomach cramps. Su Qingwan lay on the ground in pain, pressing her stomach. I'm dying, it hurts so much, please save me. Don't want to die. Yizun squatted in front of her, his body backlit, his outline looking particularly cold in the dim light. I want to live. I don't want to be locked up in a small dark room. I'm scared. Please take me out. Su Qingwan stretched out her hand with broken fingers and grabbed Yizun's trouser leg. Save me. If you keep locking me up, I'll die. Yizun didn't say anything, he just pulled her up from the ground. Follow me. Su Qingwan didn't expect Yizun to let her go so easily. She followed Yizun to Li Li's office, where there was a greasy middle-aged man. Li Li pointed at Su Qingwan and said to the middle-aged man, that's her. She's a top student with a photographic memory. The first time she called, she asked someone to pay 5,000. I'll give you a discount, 1 million. Su Qingwan froze and looked at Li Li in fear. It turns out that they didn't want to release her, but to sell her off. The greasy man stood up and walked in front of Su Qingwan. Raise your head and let me see. Su Qingwan saw that these men treated women as tools to vent their sexual desires. Going to a new place again, I don't know what it would be like to live a life worse than death. The woman's intuition told her that if she left here, she would have no way to survive. Just then, she suddenly remembered the day she first came here. Li Li told Yizun that if he liked someone, he would give that person to him. Rather than being insulted and tortured to death by this fat, greasy man. It's better to go for it, take a gamble, and seduce Yizun. The moment the greasy man touched her, Su Qingwan turned around and hugged Yizun. Yeshuan, don't sell me to others. I will give you whatever you want. She stood on tiptoe and kissed Yizun's lips. After kissing for a while, Yizun was like a wooden stake, unmoved. Li Li's playful smile rang in Su Qingwan's ears. Su Qingwan, as long as you can seduce Yizun and make him break his vow for you, you don't have to leave today. When Su Qingwan heard this, instead of relaxing, she began to despair. From the first moment she saw Yizun, she knew that he was not someone that others could control. A strong person is never lustful, and will never talk about feelings. In the eyes of the strong, there is only profit. This was taught to her by Li Jinqian. Even so, Su Qingwan would not give up easily. She bit Yizun's lips, tilted her head back, and parted the black hair on her forehead to reveal her deep black eyes. Su Qingwan is pretty, especially her eyes. As lively and classical as an ink painting. At this moment, she was in tears and looked pleading, trying hard to please Yizun. Yizun's eyes were still as cold as ever, and his body was as stiff as a stone. Su Qingwan's kiss moved from his lips to his chin. Her trembling lips gently held his Adam's apple, and her teeth touched it. She felt his body tremble. Su Qingwan saw a glimmer of hope and became bolder. Her hand went down along his lower abdomen. Suddenly, my wrist was grabbed. Yizun suddenly hugged Su Qingwan's slender waist and pushed her against the wall. Like a wild beast pouncing on its prey, it arrogantly deprived her of her breath. Su Qingwan's chest was pressed tightly against his chest, and she could clearly feel the lines of his muscles under his clothes. Hum. Su Qingwan was almost unable to breathe and made a sound of protest. The sound was so enchanting and the scene was so stimulating that Li couldn't stand it and went to the bathroom. The greasy man cursed and walked away. When everyone left, Yizun immediately stepped back, his eyes clear and his expression grim. It was as if the man who kissed Su Qingwan to death just now was not him. Su Qingwan's mouth was numbed by the kiss, her legs were too weak to stand, and her body slid straight down. Yizun reached out and pulled her into his arms, clamping her chin, scream. Su Qingwan was stunned and looked at him in surprise. Moaning. Yizun repeated again. Su Qingwan looked at the closed bathroom door and understood what he meant. He closed his eyes, made up his mind, and really screamed. Anyway, she herself sounded like a ghost howling. It was horrible. Perhaps Yizun also felt that it was too inappropriate, so he lowered his head again and sealed her lips, blocking out the sounds coming out of her mouth. After a few minutes, the bathroom door opened, and Yizun immediately let go of her and made a gesture to fasten his belt. Su Qingwan also cooperated and hurriedly hid behind Yizun to tidy up her clothes. She hurriedly let her hair down to cover her face. Li had a cigarette in his mouth, his eyes were blurry, and his face was a little red. It was obvious that he had just become self-reliant. He walked up to Yizun and patted him on the shoulder. Brother, you are too fast. You should play more often. Otherwise, if you hold it in for too long, it will get bad. Yizun was still as indifferent as ever and didn't say anything. Li was used to Yizun's coldness and didn't care about it. He turned his gaze and fell on Su Qingwan. You can stay now. As punishment, you will perform a striptease in front of everyone during dinner today, and this matter will be over. Chapter 7, Plan to Escape. Su Qingwan blinked, unable to digest Li's words for a moment. Li smiled playfully. Show your enthusiasm just now, and you will get a lot of rewards. Su Qingwan was petrified. I can't jump. Li narrowed his eyes slightly and moved the hand holding the cigarette. The scene of Li breaking two of Su Qingwan's fingers was still fresh in her mind. She was scared to death of Li and instinctively hid against the wall. Brother Li, give me another chance, I will definitely work hard. After she finished speaking, she knelt down at Li's feet without saying a word. Li chuckled, you are flexible. If you had done this earlier, wouldn't everything have been fine? Brother Li, I was wrong. I was ignorant. Please forgive me once. Li made a gesture of worshipping God. God is merciful, I will forgive you this time. If there is a next time, it will not be your fingers that will be broken, but your crown. I remember. Su Qingwan answered obediently. Good boy, work hard, and God will bless you to make a fortune. Su Qingwan stood up, bowed to Li, then turned and left. She really wanted to tell Li that God could not control the Chinese. God cannot see his cruelty, nor her despair. Su Qingwan was locked up for a day and a night, and her fingers were broken, inflamed and swollen. Coupled with the stomachache and the excessive shock he had just suffered, he returned to his room, but before he even walked in, his eyes went dark and he fainted. Su Qingwan woke up again, awakened by the pain in her fingers. When she opened her eyes, she saw Yuan looking at her worriedly. Qingwan, you finally woke up. Su Qingwan's mind went blank for a moment, and her thoughts returned to normal after a few seconds. All I could see were the dark prison decorations and the smell of rusty metal. The stench of the man's sweat and the smell of feet that hadn't been washed for years mixed together and filled her nostrils. Su Qingwan lay on the edge of the bed and vomited. I feel a sharp pain in my stomach and just retching. Yuan was terrified. Qingwan, what's wrong with you? Su Qingwan shook her head. I'm fine. Yuan helped her up and fed her some water. Why are you so stubborn? We are all under their roof now, we will do whatever they tell us to do. If you can't beat them, just join them. Do you really have to torture yourself to death? Or do you not want to live, so you are seeking death in this way? Your life is your own, and no one will keep it for you if you don't want it. Su Qingwan didn't say anything, and she didn't have the energy to speak. At night, the whole prison turned into hell. Countless men were lingering outside their door, some holding cigarettes. Brother Cheong, Wazi, let me stay in your room for one night. Su Qingwan was frightened and got up from the bed, looking at the door in horror. Yuan was sleeping on the lower bunk opposite her, and her face turned pale with fright. Then, Zhang Qiang on the upper bunk yelled, "Get lost! I haven't had enough fun yet. Who dares to get involved?" There is no soundproofing here, and everyone outside could hear the shout. The men banged on the door and shouted, Yuan, when Brother Cheong has had enough fun, I'm going to let you have a taste of my power." There is an endless stream of filthy words out there. The curses and ambiguous breathing sounds mixed together, driving people crazy. Those voices echoed in Su Qingwan's ears all night long. Su Qingwan was also afraid that the man in the room would climb into her bed in the middle of the night, so she tried hard to stay awake. After finally falling asleep, she dreamed that Li Jinqian hugged Su Lin and cursed her to stay in northern Myanmar forever. Su Qingwan kept waking up in shock, and each time she woke up she was covered in cold sweat. She knew that she would never be able to wait for Li Jinqian. She had to leave on her own. Li Li's punishment for Su Qingwan's first refusal to call has not yet ended. She was assigned to the kitchen, which had a window for ventilation. Directly opposite the window is the gate of the park. Every day when she cooked, she would stare at the gate to see what time their shift changed. It turned out that they changed shifts every 6 hours. When changing shifts, the new person will first patrol the area near the main gate, which takes about 5 minutes. Su Qingwan calculated the time and they changed shifts at 3 o'clock in the morning. At this time, we only need to solve the monitoring of the park. Within 5 minutes, she ran to the gate, climbed onto the top of the gate, crossed the barbed wire, and escaped from the park. The only way to solve the surveillance problem is to turn off the generator on the 5th floor. The computer room is in the west corner of the 5th floor. If she wants to get there, she has to pass by Li and Yizun's rooms. Su Qingwan dozed off until 2:40 in the morning, then quietly went out and went up to the 5th floor. When she passed by Yizun's room, Yizun, who was lying on the bed, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at her. Su Qingwan was frightened and opened her eyes wide in horror. Her mind was working quickly, trying to find an excuse to explain why she came to the 5th floor. But Yizun just glanced at her, closed his eyes and fell asleep again. Su Qingwan held her breath and came to the door of the motor room. I found that the door of the motor room was locked and needed a key to open it. And the key is on Li. This time the escape plan failed. The most important thing is that glance from Yizun. Did he see her or not? Su Qingwan didn't sleep much that night. The next day, she didn't have to help in the kitchen and started working on her business again. Li came out again, stood beside Su Qingwan and stared at her. The expression is still neither smiling nor laughing, and looks harmless. Su Qingwan's broken finger was still hanging on her hand, red, swollen and painful. The image of Li hitting her finger with a hammer appeared in her mind, and she didn't dare not call. Su Qingwan picked up the phone and put it to her ear. My mind went blank and I couldn't utter a word. Li's fingers tapped lightly on the table, making a slight rhythmic sound. However, Su Qingwan felt that it was the death knell for her. She took a deep breath and tried to express herself. Hello. Your son was in a car accident. The other end started cursing before she could finish. You are sick. My son is right next to you and you got into a car accident. Your whole family got into a car accident. You liar. I'm calling 110. The person on the other end hung up the phone angrily. Su Qingwan heard the busy tone and was afraid of being beaten, so she instinctively hid her hands. Sorry, I'll try again. With shaking hands, she continued to dial. But the phone was taken away by Li. He stared at Su Qingwan's face covered by her hair, his eyes sharp and fierce. Can't you talk properly? I can. Su Qingwan stuttered as soon as she opened her mouth. Li Li chuckled, but I don't think you can, or just cut off your tongue. After saying this, he took off the key ring hanging on his belt, on which hung a multifunctional knife. With a slight flick of the finger, the sharp blade pops out. Su Qingwan's pale face was reflected on the knife, her eyes were filled with fear, and her whole body was trembling. No, I was wrong, Brother Li, give me another chance. Li Li just smiled at her sinisterly. Why are you so afraid of me? I am God. I will give everyone a chance. If you can't fight me now, I will cut off your tongue myself. Is that okay? Li Li spoke cruel words in a negotiating tone. Chapter 8. Someone escaped. Su Qingwan knew that Li Li was a man of his word, and she was so frightened that she had no energy left to make a phone call. Just when she thought her tongue was going to be cut off, Yi Zun suddenly spoke. Brother Li, since we can't make phone calls, let's communicate via computer. Li Li waved the sharp knife in front of Su Qingwan's eyes and said to Yi Zun, you are responsible for keeping an eye on her. If you still can't communicate, there is no need to keep it and waste food. Li Li threw the knife on the table and left angrily. Follow me. Yi Zun turned and left. Su Qingwan stood up, reached out and grabbed a key that Li Li had thrown on the table, and put it in her pocket. Yi Zun took her to the computer, stood there with his arms folded across his chest, not saying a word, with a full sense of oppression. This time, we chat online via WeChat. The avatar is a super good-looking sexy beauty. Wearing black lace, tied with ropes, and dropped in a dark room. She has a sexy and hot body that will make any man bleed when he sees her. There are many friends in this account, some of whom I have chatted with before, and the content is all ambiguous. She took a quick look and realized it was a marriage scam. Just then, someone sent a message. Baby, long time no see, I thought you were angry and ignored me. Su Qingwan quickly looked at the chat history. It said that the last person who used this number asked him to borrow 100,000 yuan, but was rejected on the grounds that a family member was sick. Later, this man sent many messages, but this number never replied. Su Qingwan's fingers typed a few words quickly. Not angry. Just as she was about to send it, suddenly, a warm breath sprayed on her ear, like a poisonous snake crawling past. She was so frightened that her whole body tensed up and she couldn't move. Yi Zun's low voice sounded in her ears, and his breath drilled into her cochlea. The last person who used this number is dead. Think carefully before answering. Su Qingwan felt as if there were thorns on her back and her clothes were soaked with cold sweat. She immediately deleted the message she was about to send and changed it to, I'm sorry, my family has leukemia, I'm borrowing money everywhere, and I don't have time to go online. Haven't you borrowed the money yet? The man was worried. Well, my brother said he would sell me to a rich old man for 100,000 yuan for my virginity. Then she sent countless save me emojis. The man over there was heartbroken and used traditional Chinese culture to curse her non-existent elder brother. Li Li came behind them at some point and said something. Tell him now that your big brother is here and wants to take you away. He is going offline. Su Qingwan immediately typed it in and then went offline. She didn't know if what she did was right and looked at Li Li worriedly. Li Li didn't look at her but patted Yi Zun's shoulder. Brother, you are smart. Otherwise, I would have been so stubborn and almost killed 800,000 people. I have always been against solving problems with force. Yi Zun replied. Har har, it's my brother's fault. Let's go have a drink with him and tell him about your sister-in-law. She said I'm not home all day and she's crying and making a fuss. Can you help me persuade her? Su Qingwan waited for them to leave, then reached out and grabbed the key in her pocket. She prayed that Li Li wouldn't find out today. However, she still thought too well. During dinner in the evening, Li Li stood on the 5th floor and spoke to them through a loudspeaker. I lost my key. If anyone sees it, please bring it to me after dinner. Su Qingwan buried her head in eating and didn't dare to raise her head. They work 14 hours a day, and after dinner they continue to work. It was 10 o'clock in the evening before everyone washed up and went to bed. Su Qingwan went back to her room and lay on the bed without washing. Yuan came back and sat beside her bed. Are you feeling unwell? No. Su Qingwan was going to run away tonight. She really wanted to take Yuan with her, but she was not sure if she could succeed. Failure would harm Yuan, but she didn't dare to say it. Yuan sighed, don't be so stubborn. Survive first. If you die, everything will be gone. Su Qingwan nodded. At night, Su Qingwan didn't dare to sleep. She counted the time and finally made it to midnight. Amid the loud snoring, she quietly left the room. She had already figured out the terrain and climbed up to the 5th floor with ease. When passing by Yizun and Li Li's room, she stared intently inside, making sure that no one was awake before she dared to pass through quickly. I went to the door of the computer room and took out the key. There are dozens of keys, try them one by one. It took more than a minute to open the door of the computer room and go in to turn off the power. The generator is used to supply the entire park. It is huge, old-fashioned and very noisy. The generator shut down and the world went quiet. Su Qingwan turned around and went out, closing the door. Make sure that no one can open the door without the key, and the generator will not start for a while. Su Qingwan was a little anxious when going downstairs and walked very quickly. When she passed by the door of Yizun's room, she lost her balance and fell. There was a bang, and the sound was particularly obvious after the generator stopped working. She looked towards the house in panic, but it was pitch black all around and she couldn't see anything. For some reason, Su Qingwan had the illusion that Yizun was looking at her. Finished. She's dead. Su Qingwan was ready to die, and the sharp eyes suddenly disappeared. Su Qingwan didn't have time to think about it, so she got up and walked down the stairs. I got to the 1st floor smoothly, and there was an anti-theft lock on the 1st floor. The key to the anti-theft lock was very large. She groped in the dark and found 2 keys, and successfully opened the door in one go. Su Qingwan closed the door gently, rushed into the garden, and ran towards the gate with her back bent. When I arrived at the door, I didn't see any guards. I looked up and saw several cameras on the door. Because of the power outage, the infrared light also went out. The main door is locked with alloy, anti-theft and fingerprint password locks. Su Qingwan had no way to get through the fingerprint password lock and could only climb out. She put her foot on the iron door lock, held the edge of the door frame with both hands, and climbed to the top of the door. There are several layers of barbed wire on the top of the door, with blade-like spikes densely arranged together. Su Qingwan didn't care about all that. She pried open the wire mesh with her bare hands and stepped on the sharp spikes underneath with her bare feet. The cold, sharp metal pierced her foot, and she was only one step away from escaping. Her adrenaline was so high that she felt no pain. His hands were covered in blood, but he was completely unaware. She broke open several layers of barbed wire and jumped down. The top of the gate was about 2 meters from the ground. She landed on her knees and it didn't hurt much. Before I could get up, I heard a dog barking. The flashlight beam flickered inside. The security guard's voice rang out, "The barbed wire has been broken open, someone is escaping." Woohoo! The charging emergency alarm sounded, and the entire park was filled with excitement and curses. Su Qingwan ran into the forest desperately. Dark clouds covered the moon, and visibility was very low in the dark mountains. She quickly shuttled through the mountains and forests, and countless branches brushed against her body and cheeks, leaving streaks of bright red blood. Su Qingwan felt no pain. At this moment, she had only one belief, which was to escape. Don't let her get away. Li Li's voice sounded behind him like a deaf demand, followed by the barking of dogs and the sound of hurried footsteps. Su Qingwan was injured and unfamiliar with the terrain. In addition, I didn't eat or sleep well, and I was exhausted. My legs felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds, and my speed became slower and slower. The light from the flashlight behind me was getting brighter and brighter. She's going to be caught. Chapter 9, Escape and Get Caught. Su Qingwan would rather die than go back. Just then, she saw a field of grass half a person's height across the ditch. She took a few steps back, jumped up, successfully crossed the ditch, and hid in the grass, not daring to move. When she moved, the grass would sway, undoubtedly telling the other party that she was hiding there. Now she only prayed that the narrow ditch would block the smell on her body so that the dog could not smell it. Su Qingwan felt that Li Li chased her as soon as she lay down. I couldn't see anything, I could only hear Li Li's cursing. If I catch her, I will make sure she suffers a fate worse than death. Brother Li, the dog stopped moving when it got here. Where did the man go? Look for it nearby. I don't believe that bitch can run far. Then, Su Qingwan heard the footsteps of someone leaving. She lay down in the grass with her face pressed to the ground to avoid being seen. Others can't see her, and she can't see others, or even the grass in front of her moving. By the time she noticed someone was there, a hand had already reached out to her and parted the grass in front of her. Su Qingwan met Yi Zun's cold gaze. There was no emotion in his eyes, as if all the suffering in the world had nothing to do with him. This look was exactly the same as the one she felt when she fell on his door before. Su Qingwan was sure that he knew every time she passed by Yi Zun's room. Just like a spectator, watching her play her tricks. Watching her struggle like an ant. Watching her live a life worse than death, dying and struggling. Then, when she saw a glimmer of hope for survival, he easily crushed all her efforts and hopes. He is a devil, Satan. Su Qingwan hugged her head and screamed in despair. She escaped, but still couldn't get away. She had gone through so much hardship and made so many careful calculations, but in Yi Zun's eyes, she was just a rat in a cage. Funny, ridiculous. Li Li's curse rang out. Su Qingwan's feet were grabbed and her body was dragged forward. The branches and stones on the ground hurt my back so much that it almost hurt. She did not cry. She stared into the moonless night with empty eyes, waiting quietly for death. I don't know how long she walked before her feet were put down. Li Li's sinister face appeared in her sight. Countless flashlights shone on her, stinging her eyes, and a tear fell from the corner of her eye. Su Qingwan turned away and said in despair, "Just kill me." Li Li sneered, "It's not that easy to let you die." Li Li made a gesture, and a group of men took shovels and started digging a hole in the woods. Su Qingwan got up and watched them busy for half an hour numbly. A pit about 2 meters deep was dug. Su Qingwan knew that this was where she would be buried. "Li Jinqian, this is what you want to see. When I die, my body cannot return to my homeland and will forever leave the land where you live." The pit was dug, and Li Li walked up to her, disdained her dirtiness, and kicked her. "Get in there yourself, or I'll throw you in." Su Qingwan rolled in without thinking. Yes, she really rolled in. It is better to die happily than to live a life worse than death. Su Qingwan lay in the pit, waiting for them to fill it with soil. A man brought a snakeskin bag and untied the string in front of her. He pointed the mouth of the bag into the pit, and a mass of something fell out of the bag. Su Qingwan was so shocked that she sat up and saw countless snakes tangled together, which happened to land on her bare feet. What Su Qingwan fears most in her life is mollusks without legs and animals with many legs. The cold touch slowly crept over her feet, and she jumped in fright. There were also several snakes wrapped around her legs, moving up her thighs. No. She jumped up and down desperately and shook the snake off. Su Qingwan used all her strength to climb out of the pit. 2 meters is not a high place, but there is no place to climb, and no matter how hard she tries, she can't climb up. With a leap she grabbed a handful of grass at the edge of the pit. Just as she was about to use the force to climb up, the grass could not bear her weight, the soil loosened, and she fell back into the pit. He sat on the snake with his buttocks and supported his hands on the snake's body. She screamed in horror and crawled frantically out of the pit. After finally climbing up a little, he was kicked back by Li Li and fell into the snake pit again. "Brother Li, please forgive me. I will never make mistakes again. I will do whatever you ask me to do. Please forgive me." She climbed up again and again, and was kicked back again and again. Until he was exhausted and couldn't move his fingers, he could only lean in the pit, hugging his body and screaming madly. The birds and animals in the woods were frightened and ran around in panic. Seeing that she had no strength to resist, Li Li clicked his tongue twice. "It's boring. The last time, that woman screamed all night long. I heard that you used to be a delicate young lady, and you don't have the physical strength." Fu Kuei walked up to Li Li and said, "Brother Li, I have an interesting idea." "Speak." Li Li took out a cigarette, lit it, and glanced at Yi Zun. He leaned against a big tree, watching the show as if it had nothing to do with him. Fu Kuei was resentful that he had not been able to marry Su Qingwan before, so before she died, he naturally did not forget to take revenge on her. "Brother Li, the snake is digging a hole. Why don't we take off her pants, fill the hole with soil, and leave her head outside? The snake has no air, so it will naturally try to drill upwards. We just need to loosen the soil around her body and tamp down the soil on the outside. In order to survive, the snake will definitely drill into the soft place, and it's hard to say where it will drill into by then. As a man, you all know what it means to be ashamed." Li Li raised his lips with an evil smile. "You are so vicious, I really like you. Su Qingwan was completely dumbfounded when she heard their conversation. She thought this was the most horrible torture, the darkest purgatory. In fact, the real nightmare has just begun. Fu Kuei said, "Brother Li, leave the physical work of taking off her pants to me. I am the best at this." Li slapped Fu Kuei on the head. "What a waste." Fu Kuei walked happily to the edge of the pit and stared at Su Qingwan with lustful eyes. The men watching around began to howl with excitement. A second ago, Su Qingwan thought that snakes were the most terrifying animals in the world and would rather die than touch them. The moment Fu Kuei stretched out his hand to her, she immediately lay on the snakes to avoid them. Fu Kuei couldn't catch her, so he jumped into the pit, grabbed her collar and lifted her up. "You dare to hide? I didn't let you try how powerful I am, right? Now I'll give you a taste." After saying that, he reached out and violently pulled Su Qingwan's waistband. Su Qingwan grabbed her pants tightly and struggled frantically, "Get out of here, don't touch me." She screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice long gone, and the sound she made was like a chainsaw hitting metal, extremely harsh. "You sleep with Yizun instead of me, just because his face looks like it can make you feel good. I'm letting you know today that a man has to have more than just a good face." Chapter 10: The Taste of Milk. Su Qingwan wanted to escape, but the pit was too deep and she couldn't climb out. Being blocked against the wall of the deep pit by Fu Kuei, he pinched her chin with his hand and his eyes swept across her chest inch by inch. After a night of running away and being overly frightened, Su Qingwan was soaked all over. The white shirt became translucent after being soaked and stuck to her skin. The well-developed chest was faintly visible in front of Fu Kuei, and he could even see the proud cleavage. She is still holding the peeper with her face half covered, which is the most alluring. Fu Kuei's breathing became heavy and his eyes were burning. Unable to resist the temptation, he bent down and smelled her chest. "It smells like milk. Are you still a virgin?" After saying this, he reached out and grabbed Su Qingwan's chest. At the critical moment, a bang suddenly sounded in the air. In the darkness, a dazzling flash of fire passed before Su Qingwan's eyes. A bullet passed through the hands of her and Fu Kuei, flew out and penetrated deeply into the soil. The soil exploded, leaving a big hole. Su Qingwan was so frightened that her face turned pale and she looked up at the pit. What appeared before his eyes was the scene of Yizun squatting beside a pit with a pistol in his hand. He was shrouded in moonlight, looking noble, handsome, mysterious and sexy. But Su Qingwan didn't dare to regard him as a savior. Her intuition told her that this man was far more terrifying than any other man here. Others are the dead in hell, he is Satan in hell, the god of death. Fu Kuei almost succeeded in drinking milk, but was suddenly interrupted and got furious on the spot. "Yeshuan, what the hell do you mean?" Yizun pointed the gun at Fu Kuei and said, "Brother Li only asked you to pull down her pants, not to rape her." Fu Kuei gritted his teeth and cursed, "Yeshuan, stop it, I'm determined to get this woman, today you." Before he could finish his words, Yizun fired another shot. This time, the bullet grazed Fu Kuei's cheek, leaving his skin torn and blood dripping. Fu Kuei covered his face and roared angrily. "You are lunatic, a lunatic." Fu Kuei crawled out, covered his face, and ran away cursing. Su Qingwan looked at the black muzzle of the gun, which was still emitting smoke, and her heart rose to her throat. She knew that killing someone in northern Myanmar was as easy as killing a chicken. The pit has been dug, just shoot her to death, and she will disappear from this world forever. Su Lin and Li Jinqian are still alive, why should she die? Before Yizun could speak, Su Qingwan immediately said, "Don't shoot, I'll take it off." She took off her pants, exposing a pair of white and tender legs to the air, in sharp contrast to her dirty appearance. Someone said, "I didn't expect this woman to have such a nice body. No wonder Fu Kuei is drooling over her." Yizun didn't say anything, just looked at Su Qingwan coldly. Su Qingwan's shirt was relatively long, covering her hips without leaving her naked. In the moonlight, she was bare-legged, her upper body was wet, and she looked timid. It is like a willow swaying in the wind, with a kind of broken beauty that makes men's blood boil. Fuck. This woman has an ugly face but a damn good figure. The men's eyes were as fierce as those of wolves and tigers, and they couldn't wait to pounce on Su Qingwan and eat her alive. Su Qingwan hugged her body and hid in the pit, shivering. There were snakes in the pit, constantly crawling over the backs of her feet, and the goosebumps on her body never went away. "Okay, let's get started." Li gave the order. Everyone took shovels and started filling the pit with soil. Su Qingwan was so scared that she climbed up, but someone tied her hands and feet with ropes, threw her into the pit, and continued to fill it with soil. In order to avoid being buried alive, she had to use her hands and feet to stand up with difficulty. In a moment, her body was buried in the soil. While burying her, the men stepped hard on the soil around the pit. The only thing left was the loose soil near her body, making it easy for the snake to climb up. Su Qingwan clearly felt the snake under her feet struggling frantically, digging holes, and crawling up her legs. "No, please let me go." Suddenly, a snake bit her toe and she screamed, "Arr!" Everyone burst into laughter and watched her helpless struggle cruelly. After a moment, Su Qingwan was buried until only her head was left. Countless snakes were struggling frantically around her calves. The cold touch and the wriggling of the reptiles made her so disgusted that she wished she were dead. "But I couldn't die, I could only tremble and scream constantly." Su Qingwan thought that she would just be buried in the pit as punishment for a while and then be taken back. Now I know that they were going to leave her here to die. "No. Don't abandon me, please take me away, you can beat me or scold me, just don't leave me here." Su Qingwan's eyes were blurred with tears, and she could only barely make out the tall figure walking at the back. At this moment, that back figure overlapped with the moment when Li Jinqian left her behind. She desperately shouted at the man, "Li Jinqian, come back, don't leave me." However, that figure walked away so resolutely, so ruthlessly, and without any reluctance. The snake in the soil was still wriggling, crawling up her calf and thigh. "No. Get away, get away. Help. Is there anyone? Help." She struggled desperately, but her hands and feet were tied and she couldn't move. Su Qingwan cried all night until her voice became hoarse and she couldn't make any sound. As the day turned into the night, she became extremely hungry and thirsty, her lips became chapped, her eyes became bloodshot, and her face became sallow. Her brain started to become cloudy and she couldn't concentrate. "She is dying of thirst." Su Qingwan had thought that she might die from illness or a car accident, but she had never thought that she might die of thirst. Her consciousness began to blur, and when she was about to collapse, suddenly a loud thunder struck from the sky. It fell on a big tree in front of her, burning the tree and breaking it in half. Dark clouds covered the sky, lightning and thunder flashed, and heavy rain poured down from the sky. Jade beads as big as beans fell on her face, pulling her back from the brink of death. Su Qingwan raised her head, opened her mouth, and swallowed the rain in big gulps. The lips were moistened, and the sore throat felt like being cut by a blade every time he swallowed. The pain was unbearable. "I hadn't drunk much before I vomited it all out because my stomach was churning and I felt uncomfortable because I hadn't eaten for a long time." She continued to drink, vomited and drank again, going back and forth like this until the rain stopped. The surroundings became quiet, she regained consciousness, and realized that there was a pair of sharp wolf-like eyes staring at her in the darkness. "Who's there?" she yelled. "Over there." The sound that came out was broken and hoarse, and she couldn't even hear what she said. This is an endless forest with wild animals roaming around. If a wild beast came at this time, it would easily blow her head apart as if it were a watermelon. Chapter 11, Torment in Hell. Su Qingwan remained highly alert and kept staring in that direction. It was not until dawn that the vision disappeared. She was exhausted and passed out with black eyes. Su Qingwan woke up again, and was awakened by the pain of being slapped hard in the face. Dead. When Su Qingwan opened her eyes, she saw Li Li holding a cigarette and staring at her with disgust. Fu Kuei said at the side, "Boss, if it wasn't for the rain last night, she would have died a long time ago. This woman is too tough." Su Qingwan begged for mercy, but her throat was damaged and she couldn't make a sound. She could only look at this demon pleadingly. Li Li made a gesture of faith in God. "God is merciful and has given you a life, so let you live." So Su Qingwan was pulled out and led back like a dead dog. It was morning, just after dawn, and no one had gotten up yet. The entire prison was dead silent. When Su Qingwan and the others entered the room, the noise they made woke up the people who were sleeping. Everyone came out and stood in the corridor looking at Su Qingwan. Li Li asked Su Qingwan to sit at a table and brought her a bowl of porridge. "Drink it." Su Qingwan was almost dying of hunger. Not to mention porridge, she could even drink poison. She picked it up, without even using a spoon, and poured it into her mouth. The porridge had just come out of the pot and it was so hot that her tongue and throat were full of blisters. She didn't care about anything else and swallowed it down desperately. "I finished a bowl of porridge in one breath." My tongue was burned and numb, and my entire throat and stomach were aching. Li didn't give her any chance to feel pain. He grabbed her hair and pulled her up. "Follow me." Qingwan didn't dare to resist and followed him upstairs. The men standing in the corridor saw that she was covered in dirt and were afraid of being touched, so they all backed away. Some of the lustful ones squatted down and looked under the hem of her clothes. Someone cursed, "You are so excited to see this woman that even dirty dogs won't touch. Damn, have you never seen a woman before?" Dirty, dirty, obscene, and all kinds of unbearable words attacked Qingwan like bombs. She no longer felt uncomfortable. Even though many people were lying on the ground looking under her clothes, she did not feel any shame. In the face of life and death, nothing matters. After finally reaching the 5th floor, Qingwan felt something strange in her body. The body becomes hot, blood circulation speeds up, and the skin becomes sensitive. Even the slightest friction of clothes brought about an electric shock-like tremor. She immediately realized that there was something wrong with the porridge she had just drunk. Qingwan hesitated for just a moment before Li pushed her hard. Her body staggered forward due to inertia, and she ran several steps before she stabilized herself. Li disliked her, grabbed her arm and dragged her to a closed door. There was a sound of a dog barking from inside the door. Li opened the door with the key and pushed her in. Qingwan was too weak to stand steadily and fell flat on her face. When she got up, she saw Li had someone put a large bowl of porridge at the door. Several dogs immediately crowded in and scrambled for the food frantically. The door was closed and locked with a click. At the moment the door closed, Qingwan saw clearly that those dogs were all males. The aroma of porridge filled the air. This smell was very familiar. Qingwan just drank a bowl. There is medicine in the porridge that the dog eats. She climbed up and rushed over, snatching the bowl away, only to find that all the food had been eaten and the bowl had been licked clean. Several dogs surrounded her and bared their teeth, venting their dissatisfaction about having their food taken away. Qingwan dropped the bowl, retreated to the corner, leaned her back against the wall, and trembled with fear. "My body is hot, my blood is boiling, and I feel uncomfortable." Qingwan knew that it would take a few minutes for the medicine to take effect on these dogs, and by then, she would be worse off than dead. She looked around hurriedly and found a camera right in front of her, with its infrared light flashing. Qingwan once again felt the invisible gaze in the darkness. This look is so familiar, it's Yizun. Yizun was looking at her through the camera. Qingwan shouted to the camera, "Save me." She couldn't make any sound and could only speak with her mouth. She knew Yizun could see it. But there was no response from the other end. The dog that took the medicine became restless and paced back and forth. In the darkness, his eyes glowed with a cold light, which was extremely terrifying. Qingwan rushed under the camera and shouted in a hoarse voice, "Let me out, please." She couldn't even hear the sound she made. The worst thing was her body's reaction. "It's hot." The smell of female hormones instantly filled the entire enclosed space. This smell may not be obvious to humans. But for canines with a keen sense of smell, it is the smell of a female in heat, which can drive them crazy. In an instant, all the dogs stopped walking anxiously and looked at Qingwan in unison. His eyes were hungry, his muscles were tense, and he was ready to strike. Qingwan was so frightened that she instinctively climbed up the wall and touched an iron rod coming out of the wall. She immediately climbed up by holding onto the wall. The iron rod was very short, and it was difficult to stand on it with one foot. She leaned against the wall, shifted her weight to the wall, and tried hard not to fall. The dog was drawn to the smell of her hormones and walked underneath her, sniffing the sweat dripping from her body. Then he let out a crazy howl. Some even couldn't stand it and jumped up to try to jump up. Qingwan's feet were touched by the dog's tongue several times, and she got goosebumps in disgust. The dog's thing has a barbed wire. If she falls down, she will fall into the group of dogs and will definitely be torn to pieces. She was going crazy just thinking about that kind of pain. My clothes were soaked with sweat, the soles of my feet were covered in sweat, I started to slip and couldn't stand steadily. Qingwan felt hot and in pain, and she tried hard to keep her mind clear. She couldn't just surrender, she had to live. If she had weapons, she might be able to defeat these beasts. Arms. Qingwan suddenly thought of the big bowl that the dog had eaten from before, which was right at the door. In the dark room, with the infrared light from the camera, she could barely see the outline of the bowl. At the moment when Su Qingwan was about to slide, she jumped up and fell at the door from a high place, just grabbing the bowl. She ignored the pain in her body and smashed the bowl hard, grabbing the broken porcelain with both hands. The moment the dog pounced on her, she stabbed her bright eyes hard. The dog let out a scream and fell to the ground. She got up and hugged the second dog that rushed up. Shove a sharp porcelain object into the dog's neck, severing its trachea. The third dog bit her arm, and she used her backhand to stab the porcelain shard into its head. As for the fourth dog, she didn't have time to grab the porcelain shards, so she pressed it to the ground and broke its neck. The room suddenly became silent. The air was filled with a strong smell of blood, and the breath of death surrounded Su Qingwan. She was exhausted and lay curled up among a pile of dead dogs. I feel so uncomfortable and my body is so hot. Su Qingwan stared at the dead dogs beside her and actually thought they were pretty. It's so painful. Can't stand it. Chapter 12, No Life Without Madness. Su Qingwan rolled on the ground, and unbuttoned her clothes in pain, revealing her fair and tender body. The cold air touched her skin, and she breathed a sigh of relief at the cool touch. She moaned softly, her eyes were seductive, and her body twisted into sexy curves like a snake. Su Qingwan knew that the eyes behind the camera were staring at her, so she began to beg for mercy. I can't do it anymore, please. Physiological tears rolled out from the corners of my eyes. His lips were bitten and bleeding. Her body was covered with bruises from her own pinching. It turns out that being drugged is not like what the books say about just stabbing yourself with a knife and then getting over it. It can't be solved by soaking in cold water. It's just like the effect of poison. If you can't get a man, you'll be worse off than dead. Self-respect, reserve, nothing. Su Qingwan covered her face, as if in this way no one would notice her embarrassing scene just now. Even so, the eyes behind the camera were always staring at her. Ice cold, without a trace of warmth. Like a man-eating wolf, it made Su Qingwan feel a chill down her spine. What are you going to do? What do you want to do? Su Qingwan held her head and made an unpleasant sound. Don't look at me, please don't look at me. She wanted to scream like crazy, but she had no strength to vent, and could only struggle in pain. She was locked up for a long time without any food. Because he was extremely hungry, he used a blade to cut the dog's skin, lowered his head and bit the dog meat directly with his mouth. Su Qingwan is like a primitive beast, living in darkness and struggling in the quagmire. There was no light in the room, no time, and time passed by without anyone noticing the day or night. It wasn't until the dog meat turned rancid and considering the temperature, she deduced that she had been locked up for at least 3 days. And the eyes behind the camera never disappeared. Su Qingwan didn't know how long she would be imprisoned, nor did she know whether Li Li wanted her to die. When the dog meat was about to be infested with maggots and became inedible, the closed door was opened. Fresh air filled her nose. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and waited until she got used to the strong light before opening her eyes and looking towards the door. What appeared before my eyes was Yizun's tall figure. He is very tall, estimated to be over 1.85 meters. He was wearing a casual white outfit today, with his hair falling on both sides of his forehead, and a sparkling 5-pointed star brooch on his chest. Yizun was standing with his back to the light, his face was dignified and cold, he was stunningly beautiful. Su Qingwan was lying on the ground among a pile of smelly dead dogs. She was stinking all over and was dirtier than a rat in the gutter. For Su Qingwan, who had been imprisoned for so many days and had experienced death and life and death several times, Yizun at this moment was like a human among the beasts and a god in the sky. Even though he was scarier than a poisonous snake, Su Qingwan still staggered to her feet, walked to the door, and hugged Yizun. I was wrong. I won't dare to run away again. I'll give you whatever you want. Su Qingwan's hands wandered around his body in a panic, trying to arouse the man's interest in her. Please him with your body. There is only one belief in my heart, and that is to survive at all costs. When I begged Li Jinqian, I was so humble, why can't I be humble when I beg others? She stood on tiptoe to kiss Yizun's lips, but before she could touch them, a hand pulled them away. Yizun stared at her with deep eyes warningly. You are too dirty, go wash yourself. Today is Mid-Autumn Festival, let's celebrate together. After Yizun finished speaking, he turned and left. Su Qingwan stared blankly at Yizun's back. What did he mean? Is her punishment over? She can live. Su Qingwan was so excited that she almost lost her balance. Yizun's instructions rang in his mind, and he hurried to the bathroom to wash up. After taking a shower, she had no clothes to change into, only her own dirty shirt covered in mud and blood. And a pair of legs, naked, without any underwear. She didn't dare to waste any time and was about to put on her shirt when there was a knock on the door. "I'm fine." Su Qingwan thought it was Yizun's urging and did not dare to delay. "Wan, it's me." Yuan's voice came from outside the door. Su Qingwan breathed a sigh of relief. "What's wrong?" "I'm sending you some clothes. They are mine. I don't know if they'll fit you." Su Qingwan hurriedly opened the door and saw Yuan alone outside. She pulled her in and locked the door. Seeing Yuan holding a set of casual clothes in her hand, she asked, "Where did you get those clothes?" "My sales volume is 50,000. The commission is enough to buy sanitary pads and a set of clothes. I'll give it to you." Su Qingwan looked at the clothes in Yuan's hands, so grateful that she was speechless for a long time. Yuan thought she disliked the clothes and hurried to explain. "Although this piece of clothing is not from a big brand, it is made in China and is made of Xinjiang cotton. We are used to wearing it and it won't cause allergies. You can just put up with it." Su Qingwan hugged Yuan and said, "Yuan, thank you." Yuan also hugged Su Qingwan, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You fool, you can't beat Li. Why do you have to go against Li? If Yizun hadn't pleaded for you, you would have been buried dead in the forest. Do you know that?" Su Qingwan didn't expect that it was Yi Xuanqing who came for love. Why did he want to save her? She didn't dare to think that Yizun had good intentions, and she couldn't bear to see a life disappear. Yuan wiped away her tears and said, "You are covered in wounds. Does it hurt?" Su Qingwan put on her clothes and said, "It doesn't hurt. It hurts, but it just feels so good to be alive. It feels so good to not be locked in a dark room and to be able to wash clean. Compared to being buried in a snake pit or locked in a small dark room with dead dogs, the pain is nothing. Wait, I'll go borrow some money from Brother Chiang and buy you some anti-inflammatory medicine. If you don't treat these injuries, the consequences will be serious." Yuan looked at the 2 deep bloody holes on her arm and almost cried again. "It was bitten by a dog." Su Qingwan answered indifferently. Yuan was surprised and asked, "Does the dog have rabies?" "It seems that only dogs in our country have rabies, and dogs in other countries don't." Su Qingwan was also thankful for this. The medical conditions in northern Myanmar were backward, and there was definitely no rabies vaccine for her. "Even if there is, I won't call her." "That's good. Let's go to the Mid-Autumn Festival party. Don't be stubborn. Just do whatever Li tells you to do. Survival of the fittest. Do you understand?" Su Qingwan nodded, "I understand." Yuan pulled her out, and in the corridor, they saw that everyone had arrived at the restaurant on the first floor. The restaurant is filled with a variety of food, as well as simple fruits and vegetables. Li stood on the stage holding a microphone and spoke. He saw Su Qingwan coming and pointed at her and said, "Come up." Su Qingwan was terribly afraid of Li. The body's stress response froze it in place. Her brain kept telling her to go up, but her feet seemed to be rooted to the ground and she couldn't move. It's over. She disobeyed Li's orders again. She would be beaten to death. When Su Qingwan was sweating in a hurry, Yuan patted her on the body. She came back to her senses with a start, was able to move again, and hurried to the stage. But because he was running too fast, he didn't pay attention to the step under his feet, took 2 steps as one, and fell flat on his face. "Chin and knee, it hurts like hell." Har. The whole room laughed. "It's because I've been locked up with the male dog for too long, and my legs are so weak that I can't stand." Chapter 13 Transformation. There was another round of playful laughter. Su Qingwan endured the humiliation and got up. Not daring to delay for a moment, she ran to Li and bowed. "Brother Li, I came up too late. I was wrong." Li looked at her with her hair disheveled and her bangs longer, covering her face, making her look like Sadako, and he couldn't like her. He handed the microphone to Su Qingwan, "Say a few words to everyone." Su Qingwan took the microphone with both hands, and her extremely beautiful eyes looked down at the audience through her hair. There were hundreds of people in the audience, some were laughing, some were mocking, but Yuan was the only one looking at her with admiration. Yuan became her only support in this dirty world. One is enough. Su Qingwan knew that her speech was not just a matter of saying a few words, but review. Li stepped down and stood beside Yizun, holding the gun at his waist with one hand. It is obvious that if she reviews herself well, she will live, and if she does not, she will die. Su Qingwan raised the microphone and said to the audience, "Hello everyone, my name is Su Qingwan, I'm from Beijing, I'm 28 years old this year, and I graduated from Qingwan University." Everyone in the audience exclaimed in amazement. In this world, everyone admires educated people, especially those with high education. Su Qingwan continued, "Do you think I'm smart? In fact, I'm stupid. I stole the key and ran away. If Brother Li hadn't rescued me, I would have died in the mouth of the beast in the forest." She bowed to Li and said, "Thank you, Brother Li." Someone burst out. "Those who graduated from Qingwan University are different. I can't learn this kind of flexible attitude. Isn't he it?" Everyone knows that Li tortured Su Qingwan terribly, but she insisted on calling the torture redemption. Such a sincere attitude of thanking is indeed contemptible. Su Qingwan ignored the insults from the audience and continued, "Everyone, don't learn from me. I am the plague of parchment scrolls. I have led you astray. I am sorry." She bowed to everyone in the audience. Someone whispered, "What is a parchment scroll?" "Have no idea." Someone who loves reading came out to answer, "The sheepskin scroll was written by Og Mandino." Who is Og Mandino? Someone similar to Chen Anji. Who is Chen Anji? You can understand it as a success expert. Su Qingwan continued to reflect, "I have learned from my mistakes these days and I don't understand why I ran away. It is a very happy thing to stay and join everyone and make money with everyone." She secretly watched Li's expression and found that he loosened his hand on the gun at his waist, and she secretly breathed a sigh of relief. "I must take responsibility for my mistakes. I am setting a goal here today. If the sales volume next month is less than 1 million, I will do a striptease for everyone to see." Everyone was in an uproar. "Ah. I've never seen a talented person take off his clothes. I really want to see it." Everyone applauded. Amid the applause, Su Qingwan shouted to the audience, "Those who believe in me will have eternal life, those who believe in me will be promoted and make a fortune. To be successful, you must first go crazy and charge forward with a simple mind." Everyone in the audience shouted, "Go, go, go." Li bumped Yizun with his shoulder. "You are right. It would be a pity to kill such a talented person. This inspiring speech is better than the performance of God like me." Yizun crossed his arms across his chest and looked at the stage indifferently, his deep eyes calmly silent. Li patted Yizun's shoulder and said, "But you have quite a taste for women. You actually fell for her. That face is really unbearable to look at. When I look at her, I think of the movie Little Days, where Sadako crawls out of the well. Are you afraid of ghosts?" Yizun raised his eyebrows. "Of course I'm afraid. Don't you see I believe in God? It's to prevent ghosts." Yizun stopped talking. Li imitated Yizun's posture, crossing his arms across his chest, but found that he could not imitate his handsomeness, so he simply put his hands on his hips. "Those on the stage, don't take off your clothes today, and do a different performance. Let's put the past behind us. There is no mention of what will happen next time. To put it bluntly, there will be no next time. Next time, you will die." After Li left, everyone shouted in unison, "Come one, come one." Su Qingwan's throat had not fully recovered after a few days of treatment, so she couldn't speak too loudly, but now she was determined to give it a try in order to get through this. "Then I will sing a song for you." "Good." The audience cheered. Although Su Qingwan hid her appearance, her body was always dirty and was not liked by others. But there are few girls here, and there is no fun like the internet. If someone is willing to perform, everyone is happy to watch. Su Qingwan raised the microphone and began to sing. "Even a fool can understand that you no longer love me, so how can you continue to hide it from the world?" As she sang, she twisted her body and everyone danced to her rhythm. The Mid-Autumn Festival Gala reached an unprecedented climax during her review. It was an hour later when Su Qingwan stepped down from the stage. Yuan pulled her to the dining table to eat, and there was plenty of beer tonight. Su Qingwan had been hungry for too long before, and now when she saw food, she wanted to eat it madly. "When I saw water, I saw the fountain of life and drank it madly. There is a 50-inch LCD TV hanging above the restaurant, which is only turned on during the Chinese New Year and other festivals. It was turned on today. There was a TV right opposite Su Qingwan. When she saw the person on TV, she froze. Li Jinqian was standing in front of a group of reporters wearing a high-end suit. He wore an amulet on his chest as decoration. Ordinary and inconspicuous things not only lower his grade, but also make his temperament sublime and give off a sense of otherworldliness. He is noble and handsome, as dazzling as the sun, moon, and stars. Li Jinqian was once shot and escaped death. She went to the temple, knelt down every step, and asked for a peace locket for him, hoping that he would wear it to keep safe. He said it was too rustic and refused to wear it. Now, he carries a peace blessing that is even more rustic than the peace locket. It turns out that he didn't dislike the dirt, but the person who gave it as a gift. Su Qingwan looked down at her heart. Why didn't it hurt anymore? Is the pain numb? Standing next to Li Jinqian was Su Lin, who was wearing a haute couture dress. Su Lin has delicate makeup, a sweet face, long straight black hair, the kind men love, and fair skin. A pair of innocent big watery eyes can best arouse a man's desire to protect. The men present saw this and sighed. This girl is so beautiful. Her skin is so beautiful that you can squeeze water out of it. I really want to take a bite. The good cabbages are eaten by pigs. Look at the man next to her. He is obviously a heartless guy. Su Qingwan felt that they had a very accurate eye for people. She didn't want to look at the couple, so she lowered her head and continued eating. Then she heard Li Jinqian's deep and magnetic voice. The latest drone developed by our company can carry more crops, such as this one, A3147. He demonstrated its usefulness in front of the TV. Zhang Qiang sighed. If this thing is used for military purposes, it can carry a lot of ammunition and bombs. No wonder Dongcheng Public Service makes so much money a year. It's amazing. Su Qingwan, the developer of this drone, was eating fried chicken and drinking beer at the moment. She knew that good days like this were rare, and if she wanted to eat meat after tonight, she would need to spend money. The sound from the TV continued. Boss Li, half a year ago, your company announced that this drone would be developed and the developer would hold a press conference. Is the developer here? Su Qingwan sneered. The researcher's life in northern Myanmar was worse than death. Chapter 14 High-End Hunter. Here she is, the one next to me. Let's ask Miss Su Lin to say a few words. Su Qingwan choked on a mouthful of beer and coughed until her face turned red. She covered her mouth and looked up at the big screen. Li Jinqian put his arm around Su Lin's slender waist and lowered his head to whisper affectionately in her ear. I don't know what he said. Su Lin's cheeks were red, and she was more beautiful than a flower, which made the men's blood boil. Su Qingwan's blood froze as she stared at the superior man without blinking. She worked overtime and developed the drone with great difficulty, but Li Jinqian actually said that it was developed by Su Lin. Su Lin shyly said to the reporters, this project is not only my first research and development since joining Dongcheng, but also my graduation project. Su Qingwan's mind was completely confused. Coming to northern Myanmar to find inspiration for writing a paper was just a trap set by Su Lin from the beginning. Trick her here and then let her die in northern Myanmar. Su Lin climbed to the top by stepping on her blood-stained bread and enjoying the fruits of her labor. But the man who had sworn to love her was hugging Su Lin and was inseparable. Li Jinqian forgot the promises he made to her. They once stood side by side like this. He forgot that his father had just died and the company was facing bankruptcy. She developed new products and snatched away other people's market share. He was shot and she blocked the bullet for him. The bullet went into her chest. Even a cold and hard man like Li Jinqian was so scared that he hugged her and cried like a baby. At that moment, Su Qingwan thought that it was the sublimation of their love. But it turned out to be the beginning of a nightmare. Su Qingwan recovered from her injuries and was discharged from the hospital, and the Su family's biological daughter was found. Li Jinqian said that he was the one who lost Su Lin that year, and he wanted to compensate her and asked her to be nice to Su Lin. She was grateful for the Su family's upbringing and treated Su Lin as her own sister. Su Lin is weak and timid, and depends on her sister for everything, so she also takes extra care of her. Little did she know that Su Lin was planning a big plan. Not only did he take away her man and all her efforts, he also wanted her life. Su Qingwan suddenly remembered a sentence. The most advanced hunters always appear as prey. This sentence is vividly demonstrated in Su Lin. Crack. A sharp pain in the palm of her hand brought Su Qingwan back to her senses. She looked down and saw that the glass she was holding had been shattered by her. The sharp broken glass pierced into her palm, causing blood to flow. Wan. Yuan shouted anxiously, standing up and holding her hand, "Let go quickly." Su Qingwan let go of her hand and the fragments fell on the table. She smiled at Yuan and said, "Don't be afraid, it's just a minor injury. I'll just go wash my hands." Su Qingwan stood up and turned to walk towards the kitchen. As soon as she took a step forward, she felt dizzy. His eyes went dark and he lost consciousness. In a daze, Su Qingwan heard Yuan crying, "Mr. Yi, please save Wan. She has a high fever and will die if she is not sent to the hospital." Su Qingwan wanted to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt as if they weighed 1,000 pounds. Her consciousness became blurry and she fell asleep again. Su Qingwan was in a daze and didn't know how long it had been before she finally woke up. When she opened her eyes, she saw Yuan sitting on her hospital bed, staring at her intently. "Wan, you finally woke up. You scared me to death." Yuan excitedly held Su Qingwan's hand. "What do you want to eat? I'll go to the kitchen to buy it for you." Su Qingwan had slept for too long. She had just recovered from a serious illness, and her body and mind were in a blank state. She was unresponsive for a long time. Yuan asked worriedly, "Are you out of your mind?" After saying this, Yuan waved her hand in front of Su Qingwan. "Who are you?" Su Qingwan sat up, leaned against the head of the bed, and looked at Yuan in confusion. Yuan was frightened and slapped her thigh. It's over. Your smart brain is burned out. What can I do?" Her eyes turned red and she was about to cry. Su Qingwan reached out and hugged Yuan. "I'm just teasing you." Yuan patted her shoulder and said, "You scared me to death. Did you know that you had a high fever of 40 degrees? If Mr. Yi hadn't given us medicine, you would have died." Su Qingwan was surprised. "Why did he give us medicine?" "I begged him, saying that I would marry you when you recovered from your illness." Yuan looked at Su Qingwan seriously. "You won't blame me, will you?" Su Qingwan smiled, calm and relaxed. "Look at my character. Isn't it a good thing if a man wants me? I lied to you." "Who told you to lie to me just now?" "Yi Zun said that we would return the money to him when we have money. You were sick and spent several hundred yuan on medicine. But this is in the mountains and it is not easy to go out. Mr. Yi went out personally and the travel fee was 50,000 yuan. Su Qingwan's face was full of black lines. "He robbed." Yuan naturally knew that it was very expensive, but human life was at stake, so nothing else mattered. "So, we have to work hard to make money in the future, otherwise we can only pledge our love to you." She winked at Su Qingwan jokingly. Su Qingwan nodded. Illness comes like a mountain falling, and goes away like a thread being pulled. After Su Qingwan woke up, she no longer felt any discomfort. At noon, he followed Yuan downstairs to eat. When he passed by Li, he pointed to the table to attract Su Qingwan's attention. Su Qingwan hurried over. "Brother Li, I was sick for 5 days and missed work. What do you think the punishment should be?" Su Qingwan said, "Brother Li, I was ignorant and ran away this time. I found that there are many loopholes in our park's surveillance and security personnel. I am willing to fix these loopholes as compensation for the delayed work time." "How to fix it?" Li raised his eyebrows slightly, as if to say, "You'd better have a good idea." "Brother Li, please send someone to assist me. It only takes me half a day to give you satisfactory results. It's hard to explain in a few words." Li glanced at Yi Zun who was eating in silence beside him. "Yeshuan, go keep an eye on her. If she runs away, I will climb into your bed tonight. You are so handsome anyway, and I won't suffer any loss if you sleep with me." Yi Zun just enjoyed his meal elegantly and didn't say a word about it. Li was used to Yi Zun's indifference, so he made a gesture and asked Su Qingwan to leave. When Su Qingwan went to queue up for food again, she separated from Yuan and ended up being with Fu Kuei. Fu Kuei was in front of her, turning his head to stare at her body with his lustful eyes. "Ugly ghost, the body is quite white, it's a pity that I didn't get it that day." The man behind Su Qingwan shouted, "Fu Kuei, you coward, if you like her, just do it." If you don't do it to this woman in public today, I will look down on you. There are only a handful of girls here, but there are thousands of men. In a man's world, besides power and money, there are only women. Everyone started shouting, Fu Kuei, although her face is ugly, her figure is really good. Su Qingwan knew that these people were dirty and despicable. That day, Zhang Qiang pushed Yuan Yuan on the dining table and did that thing in public. She knew that these people had done it many times. If he said he was going to do something disgusting to her in public, he really meant it. Looking around, all I saw were ugly and ferocious faces. She felt so sick that she wanted to vomit. Fu Kuei, do you really want to mess with me? She asked calmly. Yes, I miss you very much. Yizun went out in the heavy rain to buy medicine for you. Do you know how difficult the mountain road is? He loves you so much, you must have some addictive methods. Once you try it, you will never forget it. Chapter 15 How dare you touch my people? Just as Su Qingwan was about to speak, a cold and clean voice came, come here. The sound seemed particularly elegant and noble in the noisy restaurant. Everyone looked back and saw Yizun standing next to Li Li, staring at Su Qingwan with sharp eyes. Su Qingwan said nothing and quickly ran to Yizun's side, Mr. Yi. From today on, you move into my room. Su Qingwan was stunned for a moment, then agreed immediately. Good. Yizun and Li Li are in the same room, and neither of them is a good person. But compared to other dirty men who are only thinking about sleeping with her, these two are slightly better. Besides, Yizun is really handsome. More handsome than any man she had ever seen. Compared to being raped by other men, moving to Yeshuan's room was not so scary. Li Li gave Yizun a playful look and said, you finally got it, but your vision is not very good. After he finished speaking, he put his hands in his trouser pockets and walked away whistling. Su Qingwan stood obediently in front of Yizun, not daring to look him in the eye. I'm hungry, she said, staring at her toes. She had been sick for 5 days, and the food Yuan Yuan gave her every day was just enough to keep her alive. Now that she has recovered, she is starving. Yizun said to the people in the kitchen, from today on, her 3 meals a day will be charged to my account. Su Qingwan nodded and hurried to get food. This time no one dared to tease her or touch her. The feeling of being dependent on a strong person is really unbearable. When it was time to get her meal, she got the best food and an apple. Su Qingwan hadn't eaten fruit for a long time, so she walked to Yuan Yuan and gave her half. Yuan Yuan ate an apple and sighed, Mr. Yi is so handsome. The way a man swipes a card for a woman is so damn charming and sexy. Su Qingwan lowered her head and ate with big mouthfuls, without answering Yuan Yuan's words. Before she had taken a few bites, Yuan Yuan pulled her body and said, Wan, hurry up. Before Su Qingwan could react, she was drenched with something unknown. She raised her eyes and saw Fu Kuei's face was distorted and his eyes were wide open. Bitch, don't think that just because you're on Yizun's side, I can't take care of you. I can't sleep with you. I can torture you to death. Su Qingwan wiped the soup off her face with her sleeve. Before she could burst out in anger, Fu Kuei was kicked by someone. Fu Kuei was originally standing opposite Su Qingwan's dining table. He was kicked and flew over the table, hitting the ground on the opposite table. It hurts so much that I can't even scream. Su Qingwan looked at Yizun in horror as he kicked someone. He was like an agile leopard, easily jumping over the 70-centimeter dining table. He walked up to Fu Kuei, who had not yet gotten up, and stepped on his chest. How dare you touch my people? Fu Kuei hugged Yizun's legs and spoke with difficulty, Brother Zun, I was wrong, please forgive me. Su Qingwan could tell from the sound of Fu Kuei's voice that he was hurt. Go kowtow to Miss Su and admit your mistake. Yizun removed his foot that was stepping on Fu Kuei's chest. Fu Kuei rolled and crawled in front of Su Qingwan and kowtowed devoutly. Miss Su, I was wrong. I shouldn't have had any improper thoughts about you. I shouldn't have hit you. Please forgive me. I will be your slave in the future. I will do anything for you. Please forgive me. He banged his head against the ground, and his brain made a thumping sound. After a few hits, he had a big bump on his head. Su Qingwan looked at him coldly, counting in her mind. 50, 80. Before he reached 100, Fu Kuei began to convulse all over and fell to the ground, fainting. Li Li was afraid that Fu Kuei was really dead, so he walked up to Su Qingwan and said, Miss Su, he kowtowed and admitted his mistake, so let's forget about it. Fu Kuei is a good scammer and can create hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in sales for Li Li every month, so naturally he has to protect Fu Kuei. Su Qingwan has no achievements yet, so her status is naturally not as good as Fu Kuei's. Su Qingwan is very clear about her own capabilities. If she doesn't give Li Li face, she will be seeking death. Su Qingwan still has a good grasp of the right measure. Brother Li, I was ignorant and caused trouble. Please forgive me. Li Li laughed. Xiaosu, you are making rapid progress. I am very optimistic about you. After he finished speaking, he ordered the kitchen. Xiaosu's meal is gone, why don't you send some over? Then he ordered others, carry Fu Kuei back to the room. Fu Kuei was lifted up and looked at Su Qingwan with resentment. Obviously, he pretended to faint to get away with it because he saw that she didn't forgive him. These things are known to everyone tacitly. As lunch continued, Yuan whispered, Mr. Yi's move just now was smooth and precise. He looked like a martial artist. Who is he? Zhang Qiang said, Li Ji's savior. It is said that 2 years ago, Li Ji was almost caught, and it was Yizun who saved him. Later, Li Ji took Yizun with him as a bodyguard. In the afternoon, Su Qingwan started working and renovated the surveillance and electricity systems in the park. Yizun followed her, and when she was busy, he stood at the wall, with his arms folded, staring at her. That look was exactly the same as the eyes staring at her in the darkness. Mr. Yi, thank you for saving me. Yizun didn't say anything. Su Qingwan saw that he dared not even answer Li Li's words, so naturally she didn't dare to expect him to answer her. I heard that you are Brother Li's bodyguard. How could someone like you be willing to come to a place like this? Why would someone like Miss Su come to a place like this? If the night search does not make a sound, then the one that does make a sound will surprise everyone. Su Qingwan was speechless. After working for an entire afternoon, it was almost dark when Su Qingwan finally finished. She stood in front of Yizun, staring into his deep eyes. Do you really want me to move to your room? I'm smelly and dirty. She looked down at her body. There was still some soup left on the clothes from when Fu Gui had poured it on. I'll take you shopping for clothes. Yizun turned and left. Just as Su Qingwan was about to follow, Li Li arrived with a cigarette in his hand and a few of his men. I'm here to see the fruits of Miss Su's work this afternoon. Su Qingwan pointed at the camera above and said, I have converted this into an infrared thermal camera. From now on, whenever someone passes through the camera's shooting range, an alarm will be sounded. She pointed at the barbed wire on the wall again, and before she could explain, a mouse suddenly poked its head in from outside, touched the barbed wire, and its body was instantly burned. Su Qingwan didn't need to explain any more. I crawled out from here last time. Now, not even a mouse can get out, let alone a person. Li Li was so surprised that the cigarette in his mouth fell to the ground. Fuck. This is the legendary Godzilla electric circle. It's a Tesla coil. Su Qingwan corrected. Li Li put his shoulder on Su Qingwan's shoulder and said, Miss Su is really a talented person. You see, our motor room is the most dangerous. If someone cuts off the power, all our work will be in vain, don't you think? Yes, so I'm going to get one of these outside the engine room as well. Su Qingwan knew what Li Li wanted and gave it to him immediately. Li Li was satisfied. He hooked one hand on Yizun's shoulder and the other on Su Qingwan's. Brother Yeshuan, you have good taste. Miss Su may not be pretty, but she is useful. You must perform well in bed tonight and coax her for me. If our sales can reach 1 billion this year, I can go to the 2nd district. I will take you with me. Chapter 16 Make My Bed. This was the second time Su Qingwan had heard of the place called District 2. Zhang Qiang wants to go, Li Li wants to go, everyone wants to go. That is the goal of the Northern Myanmar Park. It was a place that everyone wanted to go, but Su Qingwan didn't want to go. She knew very well that the more glamorous a place was, the darker it was. Plus, she wanted to escape. The last time she ran, it was completely impulsive and she didn't have any strategy, but the next time she runs, she will succeed in one go. Yizun took Su Qingwan to buy clothes. The park was converted from a prison. Although it was small, it had everything. Behind the prison, there is a yard of several hundred square meters. There is a barber shop, a small supermarket and a clothing store in the yard. Su Qingwan was surprised and asked, why is there a store here? They are family members sent by the higher-ups. Yizun pointed to one of the clothing stores. Here. The so-called clothing store was simply a large white wall. There were rows of simple style clothes hanging inside, without any price tags. Su Qingwan asked the boss directly, "What clothes are the cheapest here?" She knew it wasn't easy to make money here, and she couldn't spend Yizun's money casually. When you spend money, you have to pay a corresponding price. The boss was a local and spoke the local dialect, but Su Qingwan didn't understand a word he said. Finally, Yizun chose a set of casual clothes for her and said, "Go try it on." Su Qingwan took it into the dark room and took off her clothes. Just as I was about to change my clothes, the door curtain at the back of the house was suddenly lifted and a dark figure walked out. "R." Su Qingwan was so scared that she hugged her body and screamed. Immediately afterwards, Yizun came in, pulled her into his arms, and put his warm coat on her shoulders. The female boss also came in, explaining something in a babble. "Get out," Yizun ordered forcefully. The female boss pulled the man out. Su Qingwan was still leaning in Yizun's arms. Because she was nervous, her hands tightly grasped his collar, and her nails left bloody marks on his chest. She smelled the blood and then reacted. She quickly let go of him and distanced herself from him. Because she walked too fast, the coat draped over her shoulders slipped off, and her naked body was exposed to Yizun. In a panic, she turned around abruptly and faced away from Yizun. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that." Yizun stared at her back covered by her long hair. She was very thin, with a slender waist that could be held in one hand. The buttocks are firm and perky, a standard peach buttocks, and the legs are long and straight. Her skin is as white as cream, with a blushing color, charming but not gaudy, delicate but not vulgar. Just like the purest Zhuan in the sky, even if she is struggling in the mud, she still does not care about worldly things. Such a person, as if having any improper thoughts about her, would defile her holiness. Yizun narrowed his eyes slightly, and his hard Adam's apple rolled up and down. Su Qingwan felt Yizun's sharp gaze and was completely panicked. "Mr. Yi, can you please leave? I need to change my clothes." The person behind her didn't move, and she swallowed nervously. The weak skin of the legs could not stand. Su Qingwan didn't dare to look back, nor did she dare to speak, let alone bend down to pick up the coat that had fallen to the ground. She just kept trembling. It wasn't until she heard Yizun turning around and leaving that she breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly grabbed her clothes and changed them. When she went out, she didn't dare to look at Yizun, nor did she look in the mirror, and she didn't care whether her clothes fit her. For someone who once spent several days with his lower body naked in front of everyone, having clothes to cover his body is the best reward. Su Qingwan walked up to Yizun and said, "I'm fine." "Well, let's go." Yizun walked in front. Su Qingwan followed him, and when she went out, she saw the man who had walked out of the house earlier was bleeding from the nose. The female boss took a tissue and wiped it all over his face. Looking closely, his nose seems to be crooked. Fell down. Su Qingwan didn't dare to think too much and just followed Yizun's footsteps. "Mr. Yi, I will return the money for the clothes to you." Yizun stopped and looked back at her. "Last time I bought medicine for 52,000 yuan, and today's clothes cost 200 yuan. You owe me a total of 54,000 yuan. How are you going to pay me back?" "Mr. Yi, you calculated it wrong. The running fee is 50,000, the medicine is 200, and the clothes are 200. The total is 50,400, not 52,000. Yizun is so good looking, but he is not good at math. Could it be that his Chinese teacher taught him math? The price you mentioned is my cost price, and I also need to make money." Su Qingwan thought that he had saved her life and dared not complain. "I will work hard to make money. Then before you make any money, you make the bed for me, and that's interest." Night search command. Okay. Not asking her to stay by his bedside was already a great joy. "Are you afraid of me?" Yizun frowned slightly as he looked at the woman who kept her head down and didn't dare to look at him. "No." Su Qingwan stuttered nervously as she opened her mouth. Yizun grabbed her hand, pushed her against the wall in the corner, and reached out to push her hair away from her forehead. A beautiful face was revealed. Su Qingwan has a cold appearance, but her eyes are very alluring, like a fox with bewitching charm. She was stared at by Yizun's sharp eyes and swallowed nervously. "Mr. Yi, you've lost weight." Yizun said these two words, then let go of her, turned around and left. Su Qingwan stood there in a daze for a moment. She was scared half to death, just to see whether she was fat or thin. The first thing she did when she returned was to change rooms. Su Qingwan didn't have any luggage, so she came back to pack her things, and only took the medicine she hadn't finished taking, and said goodbye to Yuan Yuan. Yuan Yuan held her hand and gave her instructions. Go and serve Mr. Yi well. No matter what he asks, you must listen to him and don't resist. Serving him is better than serving. Yuan Yuan didn't finish her words, but Su Qingwan understood. Being searched for sleep at night is hundreds or thousands of times better than sleeping with this garbage. Su Qingwan nodded. Zhang Qiang came back and saw Su Qingwan was about to leave, feeling unwilling. You've been sleeping in my room for so long, and I haven't even touched you yet, and you're leaving? How can that be? Yuan Yuan's expression changed immediately. Brother Qiang. Zhang Qiang slapped Yuan Yuan in the face. Shut up, I'll teach you a lesson. You really think you're a dying factory? It's your turn to speak here. Su Qingwan stood in front of Yuan Yuan and said, Zhang Qiang, if you want to hit someone, hit me. Don't touch Yuan Yuan. Zhang Qiang smiled evilly. You are Yi Zun's man now, how dare I hit you? Look, I have taken care of you for so long, and I didn't let anyone in the room touch you. Even when you were critically ill, I didn't take advantage of you. If you want to leave, sleep with me once, and I won't make things difficult for you. Shameless. Yuan Yuan cursed angrily. Zhang Qiang ignored her and looked at Su Qingwan with interest. What if I don't want to? Su Qingwan didn't believe that Zhang Qiang would dare to force her. If you don't want to, then you can just take off all your clothes, walk out of this room and go to Yeshuan's room, and it will be all over. Zhang Qiang opened the door, leaned against it with his arms folded across his chest, and stared at Su Qingwan leisurely. Several other men in the room also clapped and cheered. Toot 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 toot. Chapter 17. No one can seduce me. Su Qingwan leaned against the wall, her face pale, her hands clenched into fists under her sleeves. She would definitely not be able to win the fight, and Yuan Yuan still had to make a living under Zhang Qiang. She would not leave a way out for herself, but would also leave one for Yuan Yuan. Yuan Yuan couldn't bear it any longer. Brother Qiang, what do you want? I'll serve you, please don't embarrass Wan. Zhang Qiang sneered, if you dare to say one more word, I will throw you into Fugue's room. The people in his room are all perverts. I will make you live a life worse than death. Yuan Yuan was so scared that she immediately covered her mouth and dared not speak. Zhang Qiang stared at Su Qingwan's chest with an evil look. He was fascinated by her figure the first time he saw her. I'll give you a minute to think about it. He gave the order in a condescending tone, as if he was showing mercy. If it were another woman, she might have no choice but to compromise. But who is Su Qingwan? She was a woman who knew that her legs would be broken, her tendons pulled out, and her skin peeled off, but she still dared to run away. How could I compromise so easily? Su Qingwan raised her chin and said, I choose to take off all my clothes and walk out. She grabbed the hem of her casual clothes and was about to take them off when Yi Zun's voice came from outside. You haven't packed your things yet. Su Qingwan immediately grabbed her things and ran out. Okay. Yi Zun glanced at Zhang Qiang at the door with a cold expression, and walked away without saying a word. Zhang Qiang shuddered all over. He didn't know why, but he felt that the look in Yi Zun's eyes just now was as if he had slept with his wife and wanted to tear him into pieces. Su Qingwan followed behind Yi Zun and whispered, Mr. Yi, can Yuan Yuan move to our room? Yi Zun didn't answer her at all. Yi Zun's room had 2 bunk beds, but only 2 people lived there. The bed was also better than the other rooms, clean and tidy. There is also a hydroponic evergreen on the small round table. The evergreen is well maintained and has lush branches and leaves. Yi Zun pointed at his upper bunk. You sleep here. Su Qingwan put her things on the bed and looked at him pitifully. Yuan Yuan is living a life worse than death in that room. Can you please help her? Yi Zun put his hands in his pockets, leaning against the bed, his posture cool and cold. No. Su Qingwan was so anxious that she wanted to cry. She knew that someone like Yi Zun would not help someone for no reason. There must be some ulterior motive in helping her. But now she is penniless and all she can give is her body. She knew her role when she agreed to move in. Su Qingwan took a deep breath, gave it her all, and slowly hugged Yi Zun. She stood on tiptoe and kissed him on the lips flatteringly. Yi Zun's lips were just like him, cold and without any temperature. Su Qingwan kissed for a long time but couldn't warm it up. There was no choice but to nibble it gently. Her tongue boldly pried open his lips, but was blocked by his teeth. Su Qingwan was very anxious and nervous, sweat dripped down her forehead and her eyes were red. "Mr. Yi, please help me, please." Her breath is as sweet as orchid, her eyes are as charming as silk, and her voice is soft and sticky, enough to drive any witness crazy. Yi Zun was so cold and indifferent that he didn't seem like a man. "Miss Su, unless I am willing, no one can seduce me." Yi Zun pushed her away and said, "You should think about yourself and how to complete the performance and survive before talking about other things." After saying this, he left without looking back. Su Qingwan leaned weakly on the bed and wiped the sweat off her face with her sleeve. Yi Zun said that she couldn't seduce him, but that day in Li Li's office, he was clearly aroused. Or was he just acting along with her? Yi Zun started paying attention to her from that time on. What did he want from her? They still had to work at night, so Li Li called the 5 newcomers aside and gave them a lecture. Today is the last day of the month. The sales for new employees in the first month is 50,000. Now you two are the only ones who haven't completed it. According to the rules, you have to cut off a finger. You can choose which one to cut off. Su Qingwan had broken 2 fingers and had never received treatment, so her fingers grew crooked and looked very ugly. Su Qingwan never wanted to experience the pain of a severed finger again. The man next to her said, "I'll call and ask my family to send me money." Li Li handed him the phone and put his hands on his hips waiting for him to call. The man called home and cried, saying that he was tricked into coming to Northern Myanmar and that one of his hands would be chopped off if he didn't pay. His family quickly called and gave him 50,000 yuan. Li Li patted the man's shoulder with satisfaction, "Well done." Then he walked up to Su Qingwan and asked, "What are your performance? Here, no one cares whether you go to work or not, and no one cares whether you are sick or not, they only look at the results." Su Qingwan said without hesitation, "I have money myself, can I transfer the money?" She has worked for many years, leading a team and researching projects, and has accumulated quite a bit of savings. This was also the reason why she had the confidence to make a promise to achieve a sales volume of 1 million next month after her self-examination. If you can't make money, just transfer it from your own account. In Su Qingwan's opinion, as long as she can go back alive, even if the money is gone, the person is still there, and she can earn back any money. Li Li chuckled, "I didn't expect our Miss Su to be a wealthy woman." Turn around. Su Qingwan got her own mobile phone and transferred the money through online banking. However, the online bank reminded her that the card had not been used for a month and was frozen, so she needed to go to the bank with her ID card to unfreeze it. Su Qingwan froze. Damn it, she almost forgot that anti-fraud measures in the country are very serious recently. If you don't pay attention to your account transactions, they will be limited and frozen. She had been left in Northern Myanmar for a month, and suddenly she transferred 50,000 yuan. The bank must have judged that there was something wrong with her. It's damn good. Li Li saw her expression change, took her phone and looked at it, then clicked his tongue twice. "Gao Keisheng, what are you going to do?" Su Qingwan looked at her broken finger and was scared to death. Yuan on the side said, "WAN, call your family. Don't worry about your face at this time." Su Qingwan smiled bitterly. How could she have any family? Her father was a gambler and alcoholic. Her mother committed suicide a few years after marrying her father because she couldn't stand the domestic violence. From then on, she became a wild child with no one to take care of her. "Every day I pick up trash on the streets and compete with stray dogs and cats for food." Later, she was met by Mrs. Su, who took pity on her and adopted her. She lived a wealthy life since childhood, received the best education, and grew up with Li Jinqian as childhood sweethearts. She took Su Lin's place and enjoyed everything that belonged to him. Su Qingwan has always been grateful to the Su family and vowed to repay them for the rest of her life. Later, when Su Lin came back, she also opened her heart to him. "As long as I am not busy at work, I will personally pick up and drop off my children at school no matter it is windy or rainy." He obeyed Su Lin in everything and responded to his every request. If it weren't for the Su family, she wouldn't be where she is today. She might have been beaten to death by her father like her mother. Now that she has Su Lin, her relationship with the Su family can't be as good as before. In addition, when Li Jinqian left, he said that he would leave her in Northern Myanmar, which was also the Su family's intention. She would gain nothing by calling back. Su Qingwan felt sad, but had no tears. My tears had dried up the night I was buried with the snake. Yuan saw her dilemma and suggested, how about you call your friend? Su Qingwan has been working in the industry for so many years, and all the friends she knows are Li Jinqian's friends, and their circles of friends overlap. There has always been icing on the cake, but no timely assistance. Once the project she developed was launched on the market, Li Jinqian's company's stock price soared. He is a big shot in the industry, who would dare to lend her money against his will. Even these 50,000 yuan is not enough for those people to have a meal. When Su Qingwan thought about it, the only one left was Li Jinqian. As long as I can borrow money and save my fingers, it doesn't matter if I'm a little humble. Chapter 18 Li Jinqian break up. As soon as Li Jinqian's phone was connected, the sound of a man and a woman making love came from the other end. Brother Qian, I like you so much, you are awesome. Su Lin's delicate voice was charming and seductive, even more wanton than the heroines in erotic movies. Su Qingwan frowned, her eyes were sore, and she wanted to cry but had no tears. She held the receiver close to her ear, fearing that people around her would hear her and make her situation even more embarrassing. Boss Li, I'm Su Qingwan. Sister. Su Lin exclaimed, Brother Qian, it's my sister. She was breathing heavily, with a hint of grievance mixed in with her charm. Complaining that Su Qingwan's call interrupted their good time. The noise on the other end did not stop, and the sound of the bed shaking violently came through the receiver. Su Lin's extremely happy voice broke through Su Qingwan's eardrums. Su Qingwan reached out and pressed her chest. There was a scar there, left by when she blocked a bullet for Li Jinqian. At this moment, the scar seemed to be torn open and a bullet was shot into it again. It exploded in her chest, shattering her internal organs. It took several dozen seconds for the other end of the phone to fall silent. Li Jinqian's cold voice came, Is there something wrong? Boss Li, lend me 50,000 and I'll give it to you when I get back. Su Qingwan tried hard to keep herself calm. This man was not worth her hysteria, not worth making her lose control of her emotions. Su Qingwan, how long are you going to make trouble? Do you think the company will not be able to survive without you? In this world, the world will continue to function without anyone. Su Qingwan's eyes were sore and every breath was painful. On the day Li Jinqian confessed his love to her, he hugged her and said, Wan, I will die without you. Please don't reject me and don't look at any man. I will be jealous to the point of madness. Now you say this. It's not that he has changed, his love is still as hot, it's just shifted. No, to be precise, Li Jinqian never moved, he just treated her as Su Lin's substitute. Li Jinqian, our relationship ends here. Li Jinqian sneered, Go ahead and do it. If you have the guts, don't come back for the rest of your life. After saying this, he decisively hung up the phone. Su Qingwan laughed bitterly and said, Don't go back for the rest of your life. He didn't know where she was. Could she go back? Su Qingwan called her parents. No matter what, she had to give it a try. The phone rang for a long time and I answered it when it was about to hang up. Before she could say anything, she was hit with a barrage of scolding. Wan, you're going too far. No matter how jealous you are of your sister, you can't trick her into going to Northern Myanmar. She grew up in the countryside, doesn't know anything, and has never been abroad. Northern Myanmar is hell. How could you do such a thing? Mrs. Su was crying. For so many years, I have treated you like my own daughter, held you in the palm of my hand, and given you the best of everything. But you repay kindness with hatred, treating my daughter like this. How can you be so cruel? I might as well raise a dog than raise you. Dogs know how to repay kindness, but you don't. Why am I so miserable? If I had known this would happen, I shouldn't have adopted you. I've raised a demon. Su Qingwan experienced what it felt like to be deserted by everyone, which was worse than death. Mom, I didn't. Wan, you still want to quibble after all this. You just hate Lin for liking Jin Qian, so you killed her. If we hadn't adopted you, you would have died long ago. So what if you gave Jin Qian to Lin? Mom, Li Jin and I broke up. He has nothing to do with me now. Instead of being comforted, Mrs. Su became even angrier. You mean, Lin picked up the things you didn't want? Su Qingwan, I misjudged you. You should reflect on yourself. If you keep this attitude, don't come back to this house. I don't want Lin Lin to be wronged and almost killed because I value you as my adopted daughter. After Mrs. Su finished speaking, she hung up the phone without giving Su Qingwan any explanation. The one who is favored is always right. Maybe I have accumulated enough disappointment, or maybe I have already prepared myself mentally. This time, Su Qingwan did not feel the heart-wrenching pain as in previous times. Never mind, it's fate. Su Qingwan looked at her fingers and decided to break off another one. She swore to her fingers that this was the last time they would be cut off and she would protect them well in the future. Su Qingwan handed the phone to Li Li and raised her hand. Break it. Li Li whistled and picked up the hammer from the table. Su Qingwan looked at the rusty hammer and was so scared that her breathing stopped and her face turned pale. She instinctively took a step back, but Li Li grabbed her hand and pressed it on the table. Ms. Su, don't blame Brother Li. This is the rule. If I let you go today, others will make demands tomorrow. You still have several fingers. Once they are broken, we will end it. What this means is that your hands are disabled, you can't type on the keyboard, you can't make phone calls to commit fraud, you are worthless, and you can just die. Su Qingwan looked at the raised hammer in fear, turned her face away, bit her lower lip, and waited for the pain to come. At the critical moment, Yi Zun's voice sounded like a god. I'll pay for her. Li Li put down the hammer he had raised, turned around and smiled at Yi Zun. Brother, this woman is not worth the price. Su Qingwan immediately ran to stand behind Yi Zun, shaking with fear. Yi Zun didn't waste any time and directly transferred 50,000 yuan to the park account. Li Li was so happy when he received the money that he couldn't stop smiling. He stared at Su Qingwan, who was hiding behind Yi Zun, and said, next month, if you fail to meet your performance targets again, we will settle both the old and new accounts together. Li Li grabbed the hammer and hammered the table hard, making a loud noise. He hit the stainless steel tabletop with a hammer, making a big hole, which scared everyone. Su Qingwan once again owed Yi Zun 50,000 yuan, plus the previous 54,000 yuan, the total was 104,000 yuan. She can't transfer a single cent now, and she doesn't have the confidence to pay it back. Mr. Yi, I will work hard for you and pay you back. Try it first. Yi Zun left after saying this. Su Qingwan knew that she had survived this ordeal, and her body, which she had been holding on to, softened and she fell to the ground. Yuan supported her in time. Wan, your ex-boyfriend is really a piece of shit. You were tricked into coming to Northern Myanmar, and he actually had sex with another woman. How come his thing never stops? Did you all hear it? Su Qingwan looked at Yuan in surprise. Well, the phone was on speakerphone, didn't you see? Yuan felt sorry for her and spoke with gritted teeth, wishing she could swallow Li Jinqian in one bite. Su Qingwan was so focused on the phone call that she didn't even notice that the speakerphone was on. Maybe she came across it accidentally while she was on the phone. No wonder there was such obvious amusement in Li Li's eyes. Su Qingwan has been tortured to death by these people and has no dignity at all. Now that her deepest secrets had been revealed and laid out for everyone to see, she was surrounded by shame and embarrassment. She closed her eyes and suppressed the emotions surging in her heart. It doesn't matter, at least I'm still alive. As long as you are alive, there is hope. Su Qingwan comforted herself. When I got off work in the evening, it was already 10:30. Everyone was tired and exhausted. It's not physical tiredness, but mental tiredness. There are fewer girls here, so she doesn't need to queue up to take a shower like the men. She just goes back to the room after she's done. Yi Zun was already lying on the bed, reading a book in his hand. His shirt was unbuttoned, revealing his beautiful chest muscles. She has an inverted triangle figure, long legs, and is elegant and dignified, pleasing to the eye. This man is really too good-looking. That face was three-dimensional and noble, like a god who had fallen into hell. Wherever he is, even in the darkest hell, there is light everywhere. What are you looking at? Yi Zun asked without raising his head. You have abdominal muscles. Su Qingwan blurted out, no. What book are you reading? Chapter 19. I want to touch my abdominal muscles. Su Qingwan swore that she really just wanted to ask him about the book he read. Yi Zun put the book on his chest and looked up at her. Su Qingwan didn't need him to say anything. She immediately sat down beside the bed and massaged his legs. Mr. Yi, I understand. You don't need to ask. Su Qingwan is not bragging, her massage skills are comparable to those of professionals. Li Jinqian suffers from headaches, cervical spine and waist problems due to frequent overtime work, computer use and late nights. Su Qingwan took a year-long course on acupoint massage, and she never expected that it would come in handy to please her financial sponsor. Do you need me to massage your waist? Su Qingwan opened her watery eyes and looked at Yi Zun expectantly. She is actually very afraid of making him unhappy. Once she left Yeshuan's shelter, she was afraid she would not be able to survive. Do you want to give me a massage, or do you want to touch my abs? Yi Zun sat up lazily, leaning against the head of the bed and looking at her. Su Qingwan was so embarrassed. I just want a massage. Then you can have a massage. Su Qingwan slowly leaned over and placed her hands on his abdomen. Through the thin cloth, I could feel the abdominal muscles that felt like small stones. His abdominal muscles twitched when she touched them. Su Qingwan was half burned and suddenly retracted her hand. I started. I'm lying down, you come over. Yi Zun rested his hands on his head and stared at her leisurely. Su Qingwan ignored the fanciful words he said and placed her hands on his abdominal muscles to massage him. Her fingers were very skillful and the massage force was just right, but it was not smooth because of the clothes. How about taking off your clothes? Yi Zun smiled and said, I've handed the people over to you, you can do whatever you want. Su Qingwan unbuttoned a few buttons on his shirt, revealing his strong male body in full view. There are many light-colored scars on his honey-colored skin, which are randomly distributed on his lean and beautiful muscles, creating a fatal sexiness. His chest muscles are bulging, he has 8 abdominal muscles, and his muscle curves are breathtakingly beautiful. Su Qingwan swallowed, not knowing where to start. Don't want to. Yi Zun's voice was always cold and emotionless. I do. Su Qingwan placed her hands on his abdominal muscles and began to massage him skillfully. How do you feel? Lighter or heavier? Su Qingwan's fingers moved slowly along the mermaid line, and the touch felt great. Giving a massage to such a person is a visual feast. That's good. Yi Zun picked up the book and continued reading. Su Qingwan pressed for half an hour, her hands were sore, but she didn't dare to stop. Just as she was thinking of an excuse to stop, the door was pushed open. Li walked in with a woman in his arms, and saw their intimate scene, and chuckled. Brother, is this the end? Aren't you too fast? Su Qingwan stopped immediately, stood up and called out, Hello, boss. Li walked up to Su Qingwan and stared at the half of her face that was blocked by her bangs. Miss Su, this kind of behavior is only for my brother. I like you, so don't show up in front of me if you have nothing to do, okay? Su Qingwan nodded immediately, turned around and sat beside Yi Zun's bed, acting like an invisible person. The woman next to Li glanced at Yi Zun with sparkling eyes. Zun Ji has a great figure. Li slapped her butt. I don't like you. The woman twisted her slender waist, stood in front of Su Qingwan, and stretched out her hand. Hello, my name is Wang Qinshue. Su Qingwan shook hands with her. Qianshan Mushue, what a beautiful name. In fact, Wang Qinshue is not beautiful, even a little ordinary. If you want to point out specifically what's wrong with her, you won't find any fault. Li is a woman who is very picky about appearance. Su Qingwan was very surprised that Wang Qinshue, who is not good-looking, could be Li's woman. She had been thinking about escaping and completely ignored this person. No wonder Yi Zun didn't agree to let Yuan move in. There was no extra room in this house. Wang Qinshue smiled when she was praised. Su Qingwan was stunned. Wang Qinshue's smile is charming and alluring, and her beauty is fleeting. The contrast with when she doesn't smile is too great. If I have to use a word to describe it, it would be a vixen that specializes in sucking men's yarn energy. Wang Qinshue smiled even more charmingly when she saw Su Qingwan's surprised expression. The fortune teller said that my name is destined to a sad life. What do you think, Miss Su? 8,000 mountains covered with snow at dusk, where is the lone figure heading to? This is about wild geese. Wild geese are loyal birds, and loyal people will be blessed by God. Wang Qinshue turned to Li and said, Brother Li, Miss Su is indeed a talented student. She said it very well. You are God, will you look after me? Li pulled Wang Qinshue into his arms, and his hands began to move in a disorderly manner. Wang Qinshue exclaimed, Don't pinch it, it hurts. Li ignored her pleas, pushed her down on the bed, and kissed her roughly on the lips. You want me to favor you now, don't you? Wang Qinshue made a sound between pain and happiness. High and charming. Su Qingwan was numb after hearing this. Her brain short-circuited and she stared at the two people entangled with each other without blinking. They are like wild beasts, shameless and completely oblivious to the world around them. At this moment, Li Li suddenly looked up and looked at Su Qingwan. That look was extremely aggressive. It seemed as if he would pounce on her in the next moment, unleashing his bestiality. Su Qingwan shuddered with fear and wanted to escape, but she was too nervous to move. Suddenly, a hand reached out, covered her eyes, and her body fell into a warm embrace. Like watching this. Yizun's chest was pressed against Su Qingwan's back, and she could clearly feel the beating of his pectoral muscles. I didn't mean to do that. I thought you wanted to. I don't want to. Su Qingwan replied hurriedly. Really not wanting to. Yizun lowered his voice, and his breath went into her ears, burning her ears until they turned red. No. She answered firmly. Yizun let her go and said, Tell me when you miss me. Su Qingwan hummed in confusion. Go back to sleep. Yizun patted her slender waist. Su Qingwan bounced up like a spring. He got up too quickly and hit his head on the upper bunk bed. R. In severe pain, Su Qingwan fell down and fell on Yizun. Her hands were just on his chest, her lips pressed against his. When their eyes met, she felt extremely embarrassed. Su Qingwan hurriedly propped herself up, but before she could get up, he grabbed her waist. The slender waist that had just risen up sank again and overlapped with his body. Throw yourself into my arms, ho. Yizun's sharp eyes fell on her chest. Su Qingwan looked down and saw that she was lying on her stomach with her collar drooping, revealing everything. Very beautiful. Yizun commented objectively. Su Qingwan blushed, I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. Can you let go of my waist? She tried to struggle, trying to escape his grasp. Don't move. Yizun slapped her butt as punishment. There was a snap, not a loud sound, but Su Qingwan cried out in pain. Su Qingwan had never been spanked by anyone before. This was the first time she knew how painful it was. She was totally unaware that the sound she made unintentionally was so delicate and tender, like a gentle knife that hooked people's hearts. Hearing Li Li, who was exercising in the next bed, yelling madly. Chapter 20 Yizun is a hot commodity. Su Qingwan was so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. Don't hit me. She stammered. Yizun let go of her slender waist and said, Go to sleep. Yeah. This time, Su Qingwan carefully stretched her legs under the bed, put her toes on the ground, and was about to get out of bed. But she stepped on something slippery thrown from the bed next to her, her foot slipped, and she fell again. This time they didn't kiss each other. Her chest was pressed against his chest, and their heartbeats were entangled together. Su Qingwan hurriedly looked up at Yizun. His eyes were deep and his Adam's apple moved sexily. Don't want to leave. If you want it, just say so. There's no need to play hard to get like this. Yizun hugged Su Qingwan's slender waist, turned over suddenly, and pressed her on the bed. His eyes were like a wolf or a tiger, as if they wanted to devour her. Su Qingwan swallowed nervously, Mr. Yi, you misunderstood, I just slipped. But your body says you want it. Yizun stared at her with burning eyes. Su Qingwan felt numb and her breathing was disordered. Mr. Yi, please spare me. I am not ready yet. Yizun burst out laughing, I just want to pick up my buttons, what are you thinking about? Yizun reached out and picked up a button of his shirt from her chest and placed it in her palm. Sew it up for me tomorrow. Su Qingwan's face turned as red as a boiled shrimp, and she was embarrassed to death. Okay. She held the button and lay stiffly in Yizun's arms, not daring to move. Yizun stared at her sparkling eyes for a long while before letting her go. Su Qingwan climbed to the upper bunk and lay down, her heart still pounding wildly. Did Yizun want it just now? No, how could he possibly want that? He is just a piece of ice, he has no emotions, it's just her imagination. The battle in the next bed was getting more intense. The bed was a bit noisy due to their weight until the second half of the night. Amidst the unbearable gasps, Su Qingwan occasionally heard Yizun's steady breathing. She couldn't understand how he could sleep. It was not until the second half of the night when the two people next door quieted down that Su Qingwan was able to fall asleep reluctantly. It felt like as soon as I closed my eyes, I was awakened by a deafening snoring. I opened my eyes and saw that the snoring sound came from the bed next to me. She glanced at Yizun, who was sleeping in the lower bunk again. His sleeping position hadn't changed at all. Su Qingwan was even more confused. This person was really weird. The next day, Su Qingwan, who had not slept all night, got up early and reached out to grab Yizun's quilt before he woke up. Before she could touch him, he grabbed her wrist. Yizun, who was originally sleeping soundly, opened his eyes. His eyes were as sharp as blades, murderous and ferocious. After seeing clearly that it was Su Qingwan, he regained his composure. The clear black and white of his eyes showed that he did not stay up late and slept well. What? Mr. Yi, I'll fold the quilt for you. This is my job. Yizun then let go of her hand and pulled her into his arms. Sleep for a while longer. The single bed was very small. Su Qingwan lay on the bed, her body pressed tightly against Yizun's. Her heart was beating very fast and she couldn't fall asleep at all. Yizun seemed to have really fallen asleep, and his breathing lengthened again. He didn't let go of her until it was time to get up. Good morning, Miss Su. Good morning. Su Qingwan sat up and folded the quilt. Lily stretched and walked to their bed, stared at the two of them for several seconds, and kicked the bed. I said we were so lively last night, and you were unmoved and could sleep. Lily didn't understand, and Su Qingwan didn't understand either, why Yizun could sleep. Lily patted Yizun's shoulder and said, "Brother, can you do this?" Yizun ignored Lily and turned around to wash up. Su Qingwan is a perfectionist and she must make her bed without any wrinkles. Wang Qinshue folded her arms across her chest, leaned on the bed and watched her every move. Your man is very strong, why don't you try to seduce him? Su Qingwan smiled awkwardly. Are you talking about Mr. Yi? He is not my man. Wang Qinshue raised her chin with pride. Yizun is a hot commodity. All the women in this park like him. If you don't seize the opportunity, someone else will occupy your bed in a few days. Wang Qinshue took Su Qingwan's arm and walked outside. Once you come here, everyone is the same, the lowest kind of trash. Don't think you are so noble. You are awesome if you can survive. You should bow your head when you should. Yuan and Su Qingwan have said this many times. I've always done this. Su Qingwan felt that her life was so humble that it was worse than that of a dog. You call that bowing your head? You almost announce to the whole world, I don't accept it, I want to run, I want to fight. Do you know what bowing your head means? Su Qingwan shook her head. Wang Qinshue whispered in Su Qingwan's ear, Men. They are animals that think with their lower bodies. It is better for you to take good care of their lower bodies than anything else. Su Qingwan's cheeks flushed. I don't have much experience. I'll teach you, men like it most. Su Qingwan listened very carefully, but it was not that she was really interested in this. But she knew very well that although Yizun did not seem to be interested in women, he was also a man. As long as you are a man, it is impossible not to think about that. Su Qingwan learned it well, so if she needed it, she could use it and would not be unprepared. If she was really thrown out, she would be finished. The two walked to their bathroom door and happened to meet Yizun coming out. Wang Qinshue waved at Yizun. Brother Zun, I just taught Wanwan something. She learned very seriously. You can test her learning results tonight. It was too late for Su Qingwan to cover Wang Qinshue's mouth. When her eyes met Yizun's inquiring gaze, she felt extremely embarrassed. Mr. Yi, I. Yizun strolled up to her, the corners of his mouth slightly raised. If you want to learn, I will teach you in the evening. Having said that, he turned and left. Su Qingwan's face was so red that blood could drip out. Wang Qinshue covered her mouth and looked at Yizun's back, shouting like a fangirl, Brother Zun is smiling. She shook Su Qingwan's arm. Did you see that? He smiled. He is even more handsome than Panan. Oh my god. My bones are softening. Su Qingwan then remembered that he had indeed smiled just now, so super handsome. The two went to the bathroom. Su Qingwan finished washing first and stood aside waiting for Wang Qinshue to dress up. Yeshuan is different from everyone here. He doesn't seem to be involved in the work. Where does his money come from? Wang Qinshue's eyes lit up when she heard Yizun's name. I guess he's a second-generation rich man. When he first came in, he was wearing limited edition high-end clothes. That whole outfit cost hundreds of thousands. Wang Qinshue spitted. Also, he also wore a limited edition Rolex watch, which is said to be worth millions. Su Qingwan was even more confused. Why would such a rich young man come back here? I heard before that he came here because he saved Li Li. Su Qingwan didn't believe this version of the story. Only a fool would give up the beautiful world outside and come here. Where's his watch? Why don't I see him wearing it? Perhaps his identity can be deduced from his watch. Chapter 21. Want a woman to sleep with. The watch was later given to the girl he liked. Wang Qinshua said with some envy. Where is that girl? Su Qingwan didn't think that the girl had gone home. There is no way out here, and not everyone can come up with 100 million to redeem someone like Li Jintian. If 100 million isn't enough, then 1 billion. In this world, there is nothing that money cannot solve. If there is any, it is that there is not enough money. Wang Qinshua put on her makeup and smiled at Su Qingwan. Dead, that watch, buried with that girl. Su Qingwan was stunned. Didn't Yi Zun protect her well? Why did you die? She was an undercover agent, specifically approaching Brother Zun, trying to steal Brother Li's files, but was caught red-handed. Su Qingwan could no longer imagine what would happen to that girl. Wang Qinshua described the situation at that time in great detail. After they caught her, they used all kinds of torture, pulling out her fingernails and toenails, electrocuting her, putting her in a water dungeon, and raping her. Finally, they chopped off her limbs and turned her into a human pig. She didn't even open her mouth to confess her accomplices. Later, her head was hung at the door for a month, and flies ate it until only bones were left. That scene appeared in Su Qingwan's mind, and her stomach felt churning. She covered her mouth, ran to the toilet and vomited. In the morning, my stomach was empty and nothing came out. Wang Qinshua handed her a tissue. So, don't run away, and don't have any bad thoughts. Otherwise, no matter who likes you, they can't save you. Su Qingwan spat out tears. Qinshua, go eat first, I'll wait for a while. She really couldn't eat in this state. Well, come down quickly. Wang Qinshua walked away in high heels. Su Qingwan sat on the ground exhausted, her mind full of that scene, and she hugged the toilet and vomited again. By the time she came downstairs, it was already past breakfast time. Today is the first of every month, the day for collective meetings. Everyone gathered in the open space and listened to Li Li commend those who had good performance last month. Those with good performance are qualified to ask for someone to sleep with them. Women can choose the men they like, and men can choose the women they like. To use Li Li's words, God is equal to everyone. It was Fu Kuei's turn. He squinted his eyes and looked at the girls standing in the crowd. His eyes scanned the area and finally landed on Su Qingwan. I want Su Qingwan. Su Qingwan's heart skipped a beat. She had tried hard to hide herself, but she was still being targeted. She knew that Fu Kuei had chosen her to settle a personal grudge, so she would go to Fu Kuei's room tonight. If she didn't die, she would be skinned alive. Su Qingwan hurriedly looked for Yi Zun and saw him standing in the crowd with his arms folded across his chest, staring at the person on the stage without any change in his expression. It was as if everything that was happening now had nothing to do with him. Su Qingwan instinctively wanted to go over, but was stopped by Wang Qinshua. This is the rule, no one can break it, and it's no use looking for him. At this time, Fu Kuei made an obscene gesture of thrusting his waist towards Su Qingwan. Su Qingwan, my waist is the legendary male dog waist, I guarantee that you will never stop lusting after it. He licked his tongue, and Su Qingwan, feeling disgusted, got goosebumps all over her body. What should I do? She was so anxious that she was about to cry. Her brain was working rapidly, but she could not think of a way to pass this level on her own. In the end, she could only place all her hopes on Yi Zun. After the meeting was over, Su Qingwan ran to Yi Zun and said, Mr. Yi, help me, I don't want to go. Yi Zun put one hand in his trouser pocket, leaned lazily against the tree, with the corner of his mouth slightly raised. Please. Well, I beg you. Su Qingwan answered sincerely. Then Yi Zun would look at her lips with either smile or not. That look was full of inquiry, playfulness, and ambiguity. Su Qingwan caught a message and her face blushed. I can serve you. I have no experience. Please teach me. Compared to being beaten half to death by Fu Kuei, staying with Yi Zun is like heaven. What is shame? Surviving is the king. I just wanted a kiss and you did this. Yi Zun walked up to her and ruffled her black hair with his hand. You've learned bad habits, huh? Su Qingwan died on the spot. After Yizun walked away, she remembered that he had not yet agreed to help her. But his attitude didn't seem like he wasn't willing to help. A man's heart is like a needle in the sea, it's really hard to guess. When Su Qingwan returned to her post, Yuan approached her worriedly. How is it? Did Mr. Yi agree to help you? I don't know. Su Qingwan was confused now. Yuan was so anxious that she was about to cry. What should we do? Fu Kuei, that bastard, made it clear on our first day that he wanted both of us. You have offended him before. If you fall into his hands, you will be worse off than dead. Su Qingwan stared at the computer screen, recalling the scenes of being locked up with the mad dog. She was able to kill so many mad dogs, so it shouldn't be a problem to catch Fu Kuei off guard and kill him, right? Yuan was frightened by the coldness in Su Qingwan's eyes. Wan, don't look at me like that, it's too scary. Su Qingwan came back to her senses. Don't be afraid, I have arrangements. When Su Qingwan logged into the QQ account before, the person named Wang Bo happened to be online. When I saw she was online, I started messaging her frantically. Baby, are you okay? Did your family force you? You haven't been online for a long time, I'm so worried about you. Su Qingwan typed quickly. My eldest brother forced me to marry an old man. I ran away on our wedding night. Now I dare not go home. I sleep under bridges and eat garbage every day. I am so hungry. Brother, I am dying. Wang Bo cursed Su Qingwan's family to die a miserable death. Su Qingwan continued to send messages. Brother, my phone is running out of money, so it will be shut down soon. We won't meet again. After she finished speaking, she sent a crying emoticon. In the end, Wang Bo felt sorry for her and transferred 5,000 yuan to her. Take it to the hotel and buy some food. It was the first time for Su Qingwan to defraud money. She closed her eyes as she looked at the information that the money had arrived. She did such a filthy thing. She did the thing she despised the most. She took advantage of other people's kindness and deceived them of their feelings and money. Su Qingwan knew that if she took this step, she would be a criminal and a pest to this world. Her life is over. Su Qingwan covered her face and cried silently, crying for her dead kindness. Li appeared from nowhere, stood behind her, and patted her shoulder gently. Everyone has to go through this. This is a good start. With the first 5,000, there will be 50,000, 500,000, 5 million. Li grabbed her hands and placed them on the keyboard. Go on. This god is a potential stock. Our goal is to squeeze God dry, until there is not a drop left. Women, you must squeeze men dry. Su Qingwan refused in her heart, but her hands couldn't stop. Continue to interact with Wang Bo, chat with more than a dozen people in the morning, and they want pictures. Su Qingwan found some cool and sexy photos on the internet and sent them over. In a blink of an eye, it was time for lunch, and Su Qingwan lined up with Yuan. Fu Kuei cut in line, stood behind Su Qingwan, and hugged her. Su Qingwan screamed in fear and tried desperately to pry his hands apart. His kisses fell on her neck, and his breathing became rapid. I can't stand it anymore. I want you now. Su Qingwan was so disgusted that she wanted to vomit. She struggled frantically. Let me go, you disgusting man. Yuan also hurriedly joined in and wanted to rescue Su Qingwan, but was stopped by Zhang Qiang. This is the rule. If you break the rule, you will die. Chapter 22 wrapped around Yizun's waist. After he finished speaking, Fu Kuei's hand reached out to Su Qingwan's chest. In desperation, Su Qingwan lowered her head and bit Fu Kuei's hand hard. Fu Kuei felt pain and loosened his grip. Su Qingwan rushed out as if running for her life and bumped into a strong embrace. I'm sorry. She shouted and turned to run, but the man grabbed her waist. Her body was pulled back by a powerful force and leaned into the man's arms. A clean masculine scent fills my nose, a familiar smell, it's what Yizun is looking for. Su Qingwan wrapped her arms around Yizun's waist as if she had found a savior. Mr. Yi, save me. Fu Kuei's voice chased after me like a ghost. Bitch, you want to run away after you bite me. He rushed forward and grabbed Su Qingwan's hair, but Yizun grabbed his hand. Fu Kuei, I can compensate you. Fu Kuei shook off Yizun's hand and sneered disdainfully. I don't want anything except Su Qingwan, or are you going to compensate me with yourself? I'm not interested in backdoors. In fact, Fu Kuei liked the beautiful Yuan at first, but later he chose Su Qingwan as his second choice. After being rejected by Su Qingwan, he held a grudge. Later, he was heartbroken because Su Qingwan was beaten by Yi Zun, which made him embarrassed in front of everyone in the park. Now that he has completed his mission, he has the opportunity to openly choose one of the women in the entire park. Fu Kaiban could have chosen another woman, but in order to prove himself, he had to choose Su Qingwan. Yi Zun has been in this park for some years. He is Li Li's brother. In addition, I don't interact with people much on a daily basis and am mainly responsible for purchasing. Every time he goes out and someone needs to buy something, they ask him for help, and what's more, he is a great fighter. Basically, no one would take the initiative to provoke him or offend him. Fu Kuei's remarks now are a great insult to any man. Everyone was worried about Fu Kuei. Fu Kuei fearlessly grabbed Su Qingwan's arm and said, "Yeshuan, this woman is my reward. No one can break the rules of the park." Su Qingwan held Yi Zun's waist tightly and refused to leave with Fu Kuei. "Mr. Yi, don't hand me over to him, I will die." Su Qingwan's rejection made Fu Kuei lose all face and he was so angry that he swore. "You stinky bitch, it's your blessing that I like an ugly thing like you. I don't despise you, but you dare to despise me. I will let you die under me today." After he finished speaking, he pulled Su Qingwan roughly. "Don't want." Su Qingwan's thin body was almost pulled over, and just as she was about to lose hold of Yi Zun's clothes, Yi Zun suddenly moved. He kicked Fu Kuei. Yi Zun was always ruthless in his attacks, and he kicked Fu Kuei to the ground with one kick. He pulled Su Qingwan aside with one hand, rushed forward, and before Fu Gui could get up, he raised his foot and stepped on his crotch. "R!" Fu Kuei's scream broke through the sky. He immediately used his hands to block his vital parts, but Yi Zun didn't give him any chance. He grabbed his hands and with a snap, he twisted both of his arms and dislocated them. There was another scream, and Su Qingwan's heart trembled. In front of everyone, Yi Zun raised his foot and kicked Fu Kuei hard in the vitals. One kick, two kicks, Fu Kuei's beige pants were stained red with blood. Everyone knows that Fu Kuei is useless and will never be able to touch a woman in his life. The men all clamped their legs together. Even though they were not hit, they still felt the excruciating pain. Fu Kuei screamed in pain and didn't even have time to beg for mercy. Yi Zun stepped on his chest, his eyes as sharp as a knife. "The park does have rules. You are the top performer last month. You are eligible to choose any woman to spend the night with you. You can choose now." There was total silence. How can you break a person down and then tell him that you can choose the rules? This Yi Zun is the living devil. Fu Kuei looked at Yi Zun's sharp eyes with fear, knowing that if he didn't admit his mistake, he would die at Yi Zun's hands. "I was wrong. I will never covet your woman again. Please let me go." Not only did Yi Zun not loosen his feet, he also applied pressure with his feet. As soon as he exerted force, Fu Kuei screamed in pain. It was Li Li who stepped out from the crowd and said, "Yeshuan, don't kill anyone. He is the performance champion. What this means is that he can be disabled, he can lose arms and legs, but he cannot die. If he dies, no one will make money for him." Yi Zun retracted his legs, took out a snow-white handkerchief and handed it to Su Qingwan, "Wipe it clean wherever he touched." Su Qingwan took the handkerchief and said, "I'm going to take a shower." She went to the bathroom, washed twice, and came out to see Yi Zun standing at the door. "You waiting for me?" She was surprised. Yi Zun handed her a steamed bun and a piece of fruit. "You didn't eat much just now." Su Qingwan held the white steamed buns and fruits, and for the first time, her heart, which had been frozen in northern Myanmar, felt a little warm. "Thanks." Yi Zun turned and left, leaving her with a handsome back. "Why are you so nice to me?" She didn't know why, but she always felt that Yi Zun came with a purpose. Yi Zun looked back, the corners of his mouth slightly raised. "Aren't you going to show me the techniques you learned?" Su Qingwan's cheeks turned red. God knows it's totally out of place for Yi Zun to say such fierce words with that cold face of his, but it's just so sexy. The sound of the subwoofer makes my ears pregnant. Su Qingwan felt that Yi Zun was the god of the northern Myanmar park, the evil god. Unfathomable, sometimes cold, sometimes hot, as if shrouded in fog. "I can see him and touch him, but I don't know who he is." Su Qingwan went back to work, and Yuan pulled her aside to gossip excitedly. "Mr. Yi is so awesome. He has ruined Fu Kuei. He doesn't have that kind of fun anymore. His thoughts have been completely cut off. We are both safe from now on. Su Qingwan couldn't laugh. Her intuition told her that Yizun was dangerous and she should stay away from him. But she has no choice now. Apart from searching for Yi, she has no other way to go. Yuan obviously didn't notice Su Qingwan's concerns, and said to herself, "Did you do that last night? Was Yizun fierce?" Su Qingwan's cheeks turned red as she thought of what happened last night. Yuan obviously misunderstood and said with her mouth wide open, "Wow, that's pretty fierce, isn't it? Your face is red." Su Qingwan coughed and said, "No. Then when you went to his room for the first time last night, he didn't touch you. Is he Liu Xiaohui?" Su Qingwan quickly covered Yuan's mouth and said, "Don't talk nonsense, someone heard you. What are you afraid of? He's not here, so if he heard it, then so be it. Let me tell you, many men are strong and healthy, but that's not possible. I think Mr. Yi is one of them." Before Su Qingwan could answer, she heard Li Li's voice coming from behind her. "Brother, you see women all know you are incompetent, what are you going to do in the future?" Su Qingwan turned around suddenly and saw Yizun and Li Li coming behind them at some point. Li Li looked at Su Qingwan with gloating eyes. He was very dissatisfied with Su Qingwan, and Yizun hurt Fu Kuei several times because of him. Fu Kuei is a cash cow. If he dies, he will suffer a great loss. If it weren't for the fact that Su Qingwan was a talented student at the beginning, he would have thrown her out long ago after spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and not making any profit. Now that he knew that Su Qingwan was a nuisance, if she angered Yizun, he would just throw her out. Yuan was so scared that she stood up, lowered her head and trembled. Su Qingwan instinctively hid Yuanchu behind her and looked at Yizun guiltily. Chapter 23, A Tough Guy with a Soft Heart. "I'm sorry, we didn't mean to do that. So it was intentional." Yizun put his hands in his trouser pockets, with an elegant posture, a cold expression, and eyes as sharp as a knife. Su Qingwan's legs went limp when he glanced at her. She didn't know why, but she always felt that Yizun was the kind of person who could destroy a whole army in the midst of laughter and conversation. "I didn't." Su Qingwan defended herself aggrievedly. "Are you worried about your future sex life?" Yizun hit the nail on the head. Su Qingwan's face turned red enough to look like blood. "I didn't." She wished she could find a hole to crawl into. "So embarrassing. I am too embarrassed to see anyone." Yizun lowered his head and whispered in her ear, "You wanted it, why didn't you tell me last night?" Su Qingwan was so embarrassed that she wanted to die. How could she want it? "I can give you one more chance tonight." Yizun smiled and turned away. Yuan's legs were so weak that she couldn't stand and she collapsed on the chair. "Wanwan, what did Mr. Yi say to you? You really are gossiping to death, get to work." In the evening, when Su Qingwan came back from taking a shower, she saw Fu Kuei kneeling at the door of their room. She was startled and instinctively dodged towards the door. When Fu Kuei saw Su Qingwan, he excitedly grabbed her trouser leg as if he had seen a savior. Su Qingwan jumped away in fright. "What are you going to do?" Fu Kuei cried, "Miss Su, I was wrong. I shouldn't have hurt you before. I'm in so much pain. Please give me the medicine you didn't finish taking. Otherwise, my wound will get inflamed and I'll die." Su Qingwan had been injured before, and Yizun bought a lot of medicine, and there was still a lot left. That was the sky-high priced medicine she spent tens of thousands of dollars on, and she gave it to this scumbag. What will she do next time she gets sick? Seeing her hesitation, Fu Kuei kowtowed to her hurriedly. Their head hit the ground with a bang. After only a few kowtows, his head was broken and blood flowed all over his face. Su Qingwan pressed her back against the wall, wanting to escape, but her way was blocked by Fu Kuei, so she had no choice but to face it. "Fu Kuei, do you think I'm a saint? Would you save someone who wants to kill me?" Fu Kuei kept kowtowing. "Just help me, I will work like a slave for you in the future, even my life will be yours, please." "Your life is worthless, what should I do here?" Su Qingwan has never been a good person. "When I fought business wars with others together with Li Jinqian, countless of them went bankrupt. She never shows any mercy. Winners take all, and only the fittest survive." Fu Kuei burst into tears. "Miss Su, I was wrong, I deserve to die. You are kind-hearted, you must not want to see me die, please, I will give you money, all my money will be yours." Su Qingwan laughed. "Fu Kuei, if Yizun hadn't helped me, and I fell into your hands, Would you let me go if I kowtowed to you? Fu Kuei was stunned by the question, and then said, I just like you, I have never thought of hurting you. Su Qingwan sneered, hypocritical man. She couldn't get through, so she stood on tiptoe, opened the door, and stepped over Fu Kuei. As soon as I entered the room, I saw Yizun leaning against the wall beside the door. He was wearing a black suit, with his hands in his trouser pockets and an unfathomable expression. When their eyes met, Su Qingwan saw a smile in Yizun's eyes. Instead of feeling relieved, she had the illusion that she saw the smile of the god of death. I don't know why. She always felt that if she had been kind enough to give Fu Guiyao just now, Yizun would kick her away and never look at her again. Mr. Yi, why aren't you asleep yet? When they finished work in the evening and took a shower, it was already 11 o'clock. Wait for you. Yizun strode to his bed, sat on the edge of the bed, crossed his legs, and looked at her with a half smile. Su Qingwan walked over and asked tentatively, You want me to give you a massage? That's not what you promised before. Yizun looked at him with a playful look. Su Qingwan remembered what she had told him before, that as long as he helped solve Fu Kuei's problem, she would serve him. Her cheeks flushed and she was extremely shy. Su Qingwan swallowed nervously, her mind in a state of confusion. I won't. Didn't you learn this from Wang Qinshue? Yizun stared at Su Qingwan leisurely. I haven't learned it. This kind of thing is too embarrassing. But she is now Yizun's accessory, and her existence is of little value to Yizun. If she couldn't do it, she would be thrown out by Yizun. This was the look Yizun gave Su Qingwan when she just walked in. Su Qingwan knew too well the fate of a woman who had no protection here. There are hungry wolves everywhere. Once you are thrown out, you will become someone else's food. She could hear the screams of those women clearly every night. Including Yuan, who depended on Zhongqiang and was forced to serve him every day. Compared to those dirty and ugly men, Yizun is naturally hundreds of times better. Su Qingwan took the risk. She sat next to Yizun and reached out to untie his belt. You are shaking so badly. Yizun's smiling voice came from above his head. The room was very quiet. His voice was deep and magnetic, and Su Qingwan felt her body soften when she heard it. Su Qingwan got nervous and her hand slid down a bit. Suddenly, she felt Yizun's whole body tense up. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. You're very good at it. Yizun was like a bystander, staring at her with a smile, but never taking any next action. Su Qingwan's cheeks flushed with laughter. The work was already halfway done, there was no reason to stop halfway. She took a deep breath. Mr. Yi, I want. Yizun burst out laughing, and his shoulders shook with laughter. Su Qingwan was stunned. This was the first time Yizun truly smiled in front of her. When he smiled, he wasn't as serious and cold as usual. Instead, he had a kind of friendly feeling like a brother next door. Only then did Su Qingwan realize that she had been fooled. She stood up with a blush. Mr. Yi, is it fun to play with me? It's fun. Yizun's mouth curled up slightly. Very fun. Su Qingwan was speechless. She lowered her head, bent down, straightened Yizun's trouser waist and fastened his belt. Even though I was played with, I didn't dare to complain. Li Li and Wang Qinshue came back and saw Su Qingwan adjusting Yizun's belt as soon as they entered the door. Wang Qinshue said, Wan, how do you feel about the technique I taught you? Su Qingwan was too embarrassed to look at Yizun. Very good. Li Li whistled, you guys are too fast. I wanted to come and watch the game. Brother, you're doing it in seconds. Is it worth it to go through so much trouble to get a woman just to enjoy those few seconds? Yizun reached out and held Su Qingwan in his arms, letting her sit on his lap. He bent down and kissed the corner of her mouth. She's fine. Li Li clicked his tongue twice. Brother, you are the only one who is not picky. Look at your sister-in-law, she is a real beauty, especially in bed. Her expression is always at its most beautiful. It's so exciting. Su Qingwan understood why Li Li tossed and turned until midnight every night. It turned out to be the most beautiful scene of Wang Qinshue. Sure enough, there is nothing abnormal here. Wang Qinshue looked at the corner of Su Qingwan's mouth. There was no injury and her eyes were not wet. Her cheeks were just flushed, as if she was loved. Yizun is a tough guy with a gentle and caring heart, and she really envies him. Chapter 24: A Man's Kiss. Su Qingwan always felt that Wang Qinshue's eyes were unfriendly, but she didn't care. Anyone who can survive here is a good person. I will not offend others if no one offends me. She only wants to protect herself now and doesn't care about anything else. Yizun put his hands over her eyes. Looking at me is not enough. Who are you looking at? Su Qingwan leaned in Yizun's arms and said, I didn't look at anyone. Let's go to bed then. Yizun moved the hand that was covering Su Qingwan's eyes to her chin. He lifted her face and gave her a passionate kiss. This kiss was sudden. Su Qingwan was caught off guard and opened her mouth in surprise, and he went straight in and occupied her entire mouth. He had great skills and took good care of every sensitive part of her body, kissing her until she felt numb. Su Qingwan never knew that a man's kiss could be so alluring. It's like poison, once you taste it, you're under his control and there's no escape. Hum. A tiny sound leaked out. Soft and attractive. In the quiet room, the man's bones were weakened by the sound. Li Li's eyes turned red and he couldn't help but curse. This woman's voice is fucking killing me. He grabbed Wang Qinxue and pressed her to the edge of the bed. Without giving her any chance to prepare, he directly forced himself on her. Su Qingwan couldn't hear anyone's voice at this moment. Her mind was blank and her heart was pounding. She was like a drowning person, her breath deprived and her strength drained from her body. After the kiss, Su Qingwan's whole body went limp, and she leaned breathlessly in Yizun's arms. She thought she could leave, so she stood up, but he pulled her back, pressed her on the bed and kissed her for a long time before letting her go. Okay, go to sleep. Su Qingwan was a little confused, her mind was a mess. She climbed back onto the bed and lay down before she calmed down. The more I feel that Yizun is terrifying, the more he is not controlled by desire. Every move he made was purposeful. If the kiss just now was not lascivious, then it was done intentionally for the two people opposite to see. It's like putting a protective umbrella over her. Yizun is protecting her. He used a kiss to tell Li Li how much he valued her. What exactly did he want from her? Soon, Su Qingwan heard Yizun's steady breathing. No matter how loud the noise is next door, he can always sleep peacefully. Su Qingwan also waited until the bed next to her stopped moving before she fell asleep that night. The next day, Su Qingwan got up and folded the quilt for Yizun. Wang Qinxue stood by and watched. Wanwan, what did you do before? I just play with mechanics. Su Qingwan answered simply. Playing with machinery. Boys like this. Do you like it too? Wang Qinxue didn't seem to understand her preferences. Preferences are the same for both men and women. Su Qingwan pulled the bed sheet several times but failed to smooth out the wrinkles, so she thought the sheet needed to be washed. Did he touch you last night? Wang Qinxue suddenly changed the subject. What do you think? Su Qingwan stood up and smiled at her. I don't think so. Wang Qinxue pulled Su Qingwan and walked to the gate, pointing at the tallest tree outside the courtyard wall. Did you see it? Yizun's sweetheart was buried under that tree. He buried her himself, along with his watch worth 1 million. Su Qingwan looked at the big tree that was more luxuriant than all the surrounding trees. It seemed as if it had received sufficient nutrients and had lush branches and leaves. Qinxue, what do you want to say? Yizun is the only one he loves to death, by Yueguan, who is at the level of Queen Chunyuan. You are just her substitute. Don't get too emotional, otherwise, you will be hurt all over. Su Qingwan nodded, thank you for the reminder. Do the people here have any feelings at all? Although she didn't know Wang Qinxue's motives, she was right. Love is something that not everyone can afford, nor does everyone dare to play with. Especially in this environment. Yizun is like a poisonous snake, extremely dangerous, and she dare not talk about feelings with him. Just Yizun will never fall in love with anyone. Wang Qinxue emphasized as if she was talking to herself. Does his girlfriend look like me? Su Qingwan kept covering her face, didn't comb her hair, and it was messy and looked very sloppy. It has achieved the most unattractive state. Wang Qinxue stared at Su Qingwan for a long while and said, I'm sorry, I have to tell you the truth. Compared with her, your image is like heaven and earth. You are the one. Su Qingwan nodded, then I feel relieved. Su Qingwan and Wang Bo had been getting along very well recently, and she used the 100,000 yuan dowry to compensate the old man to cheat Wang Bo out of 100,000 yuan. She also promised to meet Wang Bo after she finished the things at hand. Half a month later, her sales were only 100,500, which was a far cry from the 1 million she had promised in her previous letter of apology. Su Qingwan couldn't sleep all night. Several times when she fell asleep, she either dreamed of countless wild dogs biting her body, or dreamed of being entangled by poisonous snakes. Every time I woke up from a dream, I was sweating profusely and sat up screaming. Li has a bad temper and is always grouchy when he wakes up. Every time he is woken up, he gets so angry that he throws things at Su Qingwan. You're not sleeping late at night. Do you want to die? I'm sorry, Brother Li, I was wrong. She apologized sincerely each time. In the past, Li would just curse a few words for Yi Zun's sake. That night, Li was in a particularly bad temper and refused to give in. Come down and kneel in front of the bed. If you don't want to sleep, then don't sleep. If you dare to disturb my sleep again, I will throw you out and let other men kill you. Su Qingwan was so frightened that her heart trembled. She hurried down and knelt in front of Li's bed. In the darkness, Yi Zun's breathing was steady, as if he had not woken up from a dream. The next day, Wang Qinshua got up and saw Su Qingwan kneeling in front of the bed, and hurriedly pulled her up. Still kneeling? Your knees must be hurting. She turned around and looked at Li coquettishly. Brother Li, for my sake, please spare Wanwan this time. Li snorted coldly, which was considered as his agreement. Su Qingwan knelt all night and her knees hurt so much that she couldn't stand. Suddenly I stood up, my legs went numb, and I knelt down again. Wang Qinshua helped her up. Are you okay? I'm fine. Compared to the previous punishments, kneeling for a night was nothing. Yi Zun got up and went out without even looking at Su Qingwan. Wang Qinshua supported Su Qingwan and let her sit on Yi Zun's bed. Look, Yi Zun didn't even plead for you last night. You're not in his heart. Of course Su Qingwan knew that Yi Zun didn't have her in his heart. There is no emotion in the eyes of the strong. Besides, she is not a popular figure who is loved by everyone. If Yi Zun has her in his heart, that would be a problem. In this world, there is no love without reason. If there must be love, it is because of interests involved. She and Yi Zun have nothing. Tomorrow is National Day. We have 2 days off. I'm going to go down the mountain and go shopping. Wang Qinshua's eyes sparkled. I went out once during the Chinese New Year last year and bought cosmetics and clothes. This time we'll buy enough for the whole year. Is there anything you want? I'll bring it back for you. Su Qingwan was short of money. She couldn't even afford a 1-cent popsicle, let alone clothes. Can I go with you? Su Qingwan saw the opportunity. After her last failed escape, she reviewed the experience carefully. There is a big forest all around with all kinds of wild animals. Even if you escape, you may not survive. If you want to run, you have to escape from this forest first. Here comes your chance. Chapter 25, Just a Plaything. Go and ask Yi Zun for help. You know, I'm just a plaything of Brother Li. How can I be qualified to decide such a big thing? Wang Qinshua is right. Here, going out is a big deal, and Li has to make the decision personally for every person. And it is absolutely trustworthy, the kind that you can take out and bring back. Li hated Su Qingwan very much. She could not get any good treatment from him. The only way is to ask for help from Yi Zun. Asking for help is not that easy. It's not just a matter of kneeling down and saying a few nice words. And what Su Qingwan can give is this body. As long as I can get out, what does it matter if I sacrifice myself? At night, Su Qingwan took the initiative to climb onto Yi Zun's bed and gave him a massage. Mr. Yi, tomorrow is a day off, can you take me out to play? Su Qingwan controlled the strength of her hands very well, her voice was soft and her eyes were hooked. Yes, she wanted to seduce Yi Zun. The strength of the hands that were originally massaging became ambiguous. As long as you take me out to play, I will give you everything. Yi Zun just looked at her coldly, unmoved. She knew that this man was very cold-hearted and difficult to impress. Su Qingwan leaned over and kissed his lips. Okay. Yi Zun was like a piece of ice, without any ripples in his eyes. Su Qingwan kissed his chin and then his Adam's apple, the most vulnerable part of a man. The trembling lips and the fragrance of a woman are ambiguous and alluring. Yi Zun just looked at her coldly like a bystander. Su Qingwan felt like a clown, performing a one-man show. Performing with poor acting skills in front of a mature actor. But she had no way out. If she fails to meet her monthly sales targets, she will die. Su Qingwan now has only one way to survive, and that is to escape. Her lips moved to his collarbone and she kissed the buttons of his shirt one by one. Su Qingwan's forehead was covered with cold sweat due to nervousness. Just as she was about to take the risk and continue moving forward, Yizun's voice came. "You're too stiff. If you don't want to, don't force it." Li Li and Wang Qinxue, who were watching the fight with wide eyes on the bed opposite, burst out laughing. Li Li cursed, "Damn it! Su Qingwan, are you going to the execution ground or are you going to be sacrificed? How can a man as outstanding as my brother not be worthy of you? What do you mean by unwillingly?" Su Qingwan wished she could slap herself to death. She really tried hard, she really wanted to please Yizun. But there were two living people staring at her, so how could she possibly devote herself to it? Yizun pulled her up and she fell into his arms. Yizun pinched her chin and stared into her watery eyes. "Didn't you learn from Miss Wang, and your skills haven't improved?" Su Qingwan was stared at by his deep eyes and felt inexplicably scared. I'm sorry. Want to go out?" Su Qingwan's eyes lit up and she nodded quickly. "Then you act coquettishly for me to hear." Yizun stared at her playfully, his eyes seemed to say, "Your skills in acting like a coquettish person are better than your skills in serving men." In real life, Su Qingwan is not a delicate girl. Having been with Li Jintian for many years, she has always been a strong woman. It is too difficult for her to act coquettishly. But it's much easier to act coquettishly than to do that in front of the two people in the next bed. Su Qingwan hooked her arms around Yizun's neck and kissed his forehead. "Hubby, Muir, a Muir on the left, a Muir on the right, a Muir in the mouth, hubby, I want more. Can you do it again?" Su Qingwan's voice was originally very soft and crisp. Before she finished singing, Li Li yelled over there, "You are so good at teasing. Brother, if you don't do it to her today, I will look down on you." Yi Xuanxiao's shoulders trembled, and he lowered his head and kissed Su Qingwan on her rosy lips. "So you are so bad." Su Qingwan's cheeks were red enough to look like blood. "Are you satisfied? Do you agree to take me out?" Su Qingwan looked at Yizun with wide eyes. "Yeah." Yizun nodded firmly. Su Qingwan was overwhelmed with joy. She held Yizun's head and kissed him hard on the forehead. Then came the nose and lips, each kiss made a loud noise. "Hubby, you are so nice." She was as happy as a child, and almost got out of bed to dance. Yizun slapped her butt, "Be careful not to hit your head." Su Qingwan remembered the last time she hit her head and immediately hugged her head. "Then I'm going to bed." She got out of bed and said to the two stunned people opposite her, "Good night." Wang Qinxue leaned on Li Li's shoulder and whispered softly, "Brother Li, why do they look like they are in love?" Li Li was aroused by Su Qingwan's coquettish behavior just now. He put his hand into Wang Qinxue's clothes. "Let's fall in love too." Then the noise started coming from the other side again. Su Qingwan miraculously fell asleep that night, and just like Yizun, she was oblivious to what was happening outside. The next day, Su Qingwan followed Yizun and the others out, feeling refreshed. There were not many people going out this time, only 10 in total. Among them were the 4 people in their room, as well as Fu Kuei, Zhang Qiang and others. After walking on the mountain road for half a day, I finally saw a road. The road was a bumpy dirt road with a dilapidated van parked there. After they got on the car, everyone except Li Li was blindfolded. Su Qingwan and Yizun sat side by side, and from the moment the car started, his fingers tapped lightly on the armrests of the seat. It's just a click, with basically no sound. But Su Qingwan felt it, and she also learned Yizun's method to pass the time. 1, 2, 3. It took a total of 2 hours and 5 minutes until the car stopped. Based on the speed of the car, Su Qingwan inferred that this place was about 200 kilometers away from the mountains. "You can take off the blindfold now." Li Li's smiling voice sounded in Su Qingwan's ears. Su Qingwan took off her blindfold and leaned against the window to look out. They found themselves in a large courtyard surrounded by walls. There were also many bodyguards with guns standing in the yard, all wearing camouflage uniforms. They all have dark and oily skin and strong muscles, and at first glance they look like the kind of people who are not easy to mess with. Li Li stood at the door of the car and yelled at them, "Get out of the car. When we get in later, you are all acting like people who have never seen the world. You are embarrassing me. Be more reserved, okay?" "Got it." Su Qingwan answered loudly along with everyone else. Li Li hugged Wang Qinxue beside him, and seeing that she was wearing a coat, he took off her clothes like a gentleman. Wang Qinshue was wearing a black strapless tight skirt. The pair of round breasts on her chest jumped a little when she took off her coat. For a moment, Su Qingwan thought they would jump out. Li Li stretched out his elbow and let Wang Qinshue hook it. After getting off the car, Li Li looked back at Su Qingwan. If you had this figure, face and skills, I would treat you better. Su Qingwan's scalp tingled when she heard this. Wang Qinshue laughed sweetly. Hate it, my skills are just average, brother Li, I want the latest Chanel bags, skirts, clothes. Okay, my sweetheart, what do you want? I'll buy it for you. Su Qingwan noticed that Li Li's attitude today was surprisingly good. Several people followed a bodyguard leading the way and entered the gate. The decoration here is as luxurious as a castle. The huge living room is filled with bodyguards in black. Sitting on the sofa was a middle-aged foreign man in his 40s. His blonde hair was a dazzling golden color, and his blue eyes were as bright and shining as stars. Chapter 26: The best time to escape. The man is tall and has long legs. They may exercise regularly, have an inverted triangle body shape, and a beautiful waistline. Li Li walked up to the man and bowed 90 degrees. Dear Mr. Klaus, hello. I am here with the elites of our team to report to you on our work over the past year. Yeah. Klaus gestured yes to agree. Li Li immediately took out a document and said, Look, this is our team's performance for the year. It's here every month. Klaus took a quick glance, his face cold. 300 million, not up to standard. Li Li's legs went limp and he knelt at Klaus' feet. Sir, I believe in God every day and ask for God's blessing. God will definitely hear my request and bless me to exceed the target this year. If I fail. Li Li seemed to be suddenly at a loss for words and looked back at Su Qingwan. Su Qingwan, what do you think we should do if we can't finish it? In Su Qingwan's eyes, Li Li is a devil. Now seeing him so humble in front of Klaus, he almost put his face to the ground and kissed his feet. But Su Qingwan couldn't be happy. The person that Li Li is afraid of can only prove to be more terrifying than the devil. She was even more aware that they and Li Li were in the same boat. If Li Li can't get through this hurdle today, they won't have any hope. When one prospers, all prosper. When one suffers, all suffer. Su Qingwan said calmly, Sir, if we fail to achieve our performance this year, it will be your fault. Suddenly, Li Li almost fainted from fright. The group of people standing next to Su Qingwan were so frightened that they couldn't stand steadily and almost fell to their knees. Only Yi Zun stood upright beside Su Qingwan, unmoved. Klaus glanced at the loose sportswear. The clothes were stained a lot, perhaps because they had not been washed for a long time. Her hair was disheveled, with bangs covering half of her face, and one eye peeking out from between her hair. She looked just like Sadako from the island country. He just glanced at her and then looked away, as if looking any longer would dirty his noble blue eyes. Tell me about it. The calmness of a superior is fully demonstrated in Klaus. A man who thinks he is the only one who matters to him is never furious, but is always kind and amiable in front of little people. We didn't achieve our goals, not because we are not capable enough, but because we are in the mountains and there are frequent power outages and internet outages. You know, many times, we are just one step away from achieving results, but when there is a power outage, we fail. The hardware facilities are not good enough, and we are not God. We cannot do everything. Klaus chuckled, You're the first person to make a request of me. Isn't he it? As long as Klaus can agree to provide them with an internet cable, Su Qingwan won't get lost the next time she escapes by following the cable. The entire prison now uses wireless network. In the mountains, sometimes the signal is poor and the network is sometimes disconnected. It's just not as exaggerated as Su Qingwan said. Li Li was also smart, and quickly cooperated in scolding Su Qingwan. Shut up right there. Is cutting off the internet an excuse? We can overcome any difficulty, you know that. You are the plague mentioned in the parchment scroll. How dare you speak to the gentleman like this? Why don't you kneel down and admit your mistake? Klaus gestured, Since there is a problem with the network, correct it. This year I approve your network fee of 5 million. If it exceeds the limit, you have to find a way. Li Li kowtowed hurriedly. Yes, sir, rest assured, we will complete the task. If we fail, I will send myself to your bed for you to enjoy. Klaus chuckled, Go away. Li Li actually rolled on the ground twice and rolled back to Su Qingwan and his group. Then he pulled Wang Qinshua in front of Klaus. Sir, Qinshua hasn't seen you for a long time, and I miss you very much. Wang Qinshua always kept a smile on her face, showing her best side. Sir, I haven't seen you for a year, and you are still so handsome and charming. I miss you so much. Klaus remained cold and indifferent in the face of Wang Qinshua's seduction. Go to your room, wash up and wait for me. Wang Qinshua deliberately gasped, how annoying. Then she went upstairs in her high heels and twisted her slender waist. After Li Li and his team finished explaining their work, they left and let the next group of people take over. This villa is so big that it can be called a castle. The building is Western style, with some shadows of European palaces. Li Li also has a suite of several hundred square meters here. Several people went in and closed the door. Li Li sat on the sofa, gasping for breath, with weak legs. Make a prayer gesture, thank God for his mercy and blessing me through this difficult time. Su Qingwan watched all this with indifference. No matter how Li Li learned to believe in God like Westerners, he could not change the genes of his motherland. He knew better than anyone that God could not protect anyone. Yizun pulled Su Qingwan into a room and locked the door. Su Qingwan watched him take off his clothes and go into the bathroom. She took out her pajamas from the closet, walked to the door and listened to the sound of running water inside. Mr. Yi, is that Mr. Klaus our big boss? Yizun's voice and the sound of flowing water blended together, creating a hazy temptation. Where is this place? This place was too big. Su Qingwan had no idea of the direction and couldn't even hear if there were any cars passing by outside. I have no idea whether this is in the city or in the suburbs. The door was opened without warning, and Yizun stood naked in front of Su Qingwan. This was the first time Su Qingwan saw his body. The limbs are long and the muscles are perfectly distributed in every part of the body. Water droplets slide down the muscle lines. This is the legendary handsome man emerging from the bath, the sexy male god. Su Qingwan didn't dare to look down and nervously handed him the bathrobe in her hand. I want to know, will you tell me? No. Yizun put on a bathrobe, lay on the bed, closed his eyes and fell asleep. Su Qingwan stood at the bathroom door for a long time and then went to take a shower. The room was very large and had a thick carpet on the floor, so she lay on the floor and slept. Ever since she moved into Yizun's room, she had hardly slept since Li Li made such a loud noise every night. Now I feel sleepy when I lie down. Su Qingwan turned over and lay on her side, and saw a camera under the bed. She hurriedly looked around. There were cameras everywhere, under the closet, on the walls, and on the ceiling. In backward northern Myanmar, there are so many high-tech pinhole cameras, which shows how terrible the security here is. No wonder Yizun refused to say anything just now. His every move was being monitored, so who would dare to say anything? She got up, lay down beside Yizun, closed her eyes and fell asleep. When I woke up, I opened my eyes and found the room was dark. I turned around and saw moonlight shining in through the windowsill. And Yizun, who was sleeping next to her, had long disappeared. Su Qingwan sat up and reached out to press the switch on the bedside, but the light was not on. She turned it off and on again, but it still didn't light up. After she repeated it several times, she was sure that there was a power outage. Su Qingwan hurriedly looked at the camera without leaving any trace, and sure enough, it showed that it was turned off. She woke up instantly, got out of bed without thinking, opened the door gently, and heard snoring coming from the other room. In order not to make any noise, she walked barefoot across the living room and opened the door. The corridor was pitch black, and the whole villa was as silent as a tomb. The most dangerous place is the safest place. Now is the perfect time to escape. Chapter 27. Yizun will die. Su Qingwan walked out along the corridor, saw the stairs, and went up without thinking. She wanted to reach the top floor and observe the route. If it was in the city, she could get out by escaping from this place. Otherwise, you will have a chance to come out only after a year. And whether she can survive within this year is a question. She hadn't taken a few steps when she heard footsteps approaching. There was a sudden power outage in the middle of the night, and we had to go fix the generator before I could fall asleep. I was so sleepy. Okay, stop complaining and go fix it. If anything gets delayed because of us, you know the consequences. Then, the light of a flashlight came. Su Qingwan still had a long way to go to run upstairs, and it was too late. In desperation, she could only run to the other side of the corridor. I hadn't run a few steps when I heard someone communicating in English. The backup power of the camera has also stopped. Now the entire surveillance is paralyzed. Someone must have done this on purpose. Let's go tell the gentleman. There are people in front and behind. What to do? In desperation, Qingwan pushed open a door. I entered the door and locked it. There was a click and the lock flashed. Qingwan looked carefully and saw clearly that this was an electronic combination lock. There is backup power in the combination lock, and she pushed the door open directly. There is only one explanation, that is, the door was not closed. There's someone in the room. Qingwan instinctively pressed herself against the door, holding her breath and looking around. With the help of moonlight, she could see clearly that this was a study. There are rows of bookshelves that stretch as far as the eye can see, and floor-to-ceiling windows that extend along the walls to the farthest point. It is larger than many libraries. The study is a place where secrets are hidden. If someone comes in at this time and doesn't close the door, it is naturally to make it easier for them to leave. Even a fool knows what this is for. Qingwan knew that she had fallen into a trap inadvertently. She instinctively turned around to open the door and wanted to run, but she didn't know that the door required a password to open. Just then, the lights suddenly came on. The whole study was brightly lit. The moment Qingwan was stunned, her body was suddenly grabbed by a hand. Before she could even scream, she was pulled into someone's arms, and a hot kiss drowned out all her screams. A familiar masculine scent filled her nose and she immediately recognized it was Yizun. Yizun picked her up and walked to a camera behind the bookshelf. Without giving her a chance to speak, he kissed her fiercely. Just as Qingwan was about to push Yizun away, someone shouted at the door, "Quick, someone broke into the study, call the master." In an instant, Qingwan understood everything. Yizun wanted to escape punishment in this way. Yizun stepped back slightly and stared into her eyes with disordered breathing. "I like you." This sentence is spoken to the camera. He had a pair of peach blossom eyes, which were particularly charming when he looked at her affectionately. Qingwan was panting, her legs too weak to stand. She hooked her arms around his neck and used her eyes to convey what she wanted to say. "We can act." Yizun lowered his head and bit her lips, then leaned close to her ear and said in a tone that ensured that the camera would not pick up the sound, "You can't pass this level of acting. If you don't want to, you can push me away now." Qingwan raised her chin and bit his earlobe. "You must take me away." No matter how stupid she was, she understood the purpose of Yizun's appearance in the study. "In the middle of the night, I turned off the power, closed all the cameras, and went to the study. It couldn't be that I was going there to take a walk. Deal." Yizun picked her up and went straight to the point. The door opened with a click. Qingwan called out without thinking. "No, I can't do it anymore." She leaned her back against the bookshelf, which was as big as a wall, and began to shake violently, in danger of collapsing at any time. Klaus' voice came from the door, "When you're done, come out." Those few cold words were like a poisoned knife with a murderous edge, and Qingwan shrank back when she heard them. Yizun's eyes turned red from the stimulation, and he used his good waist to the fullest extent. At the beginning, the two were indeed acting. Later on, knowing that there were so many eyes staring at the door, they lost control. After it was over, Yizun turned his back to the camera and tidied her clothes. She didn't dare show any abnormal reaction and reached out to help Yizun tidy up his clothes. After getting dressed, Yizun put his coat on her and pulled her out from behind the bookshelf. Klaus stood at the door, followed by a group of armed bodyguards, all pointing their guns at them. Dense infrared rays fell on Qingwan and Yizun. At Klaus's command, both of them would be beaten to pieces. Qingwan grew up in her home country with stable public security. She had never seen such scenes that only appeared in movies, and she was so frightened that she couldn't stand still. Yizun hurriedly supported her. "It's not what you wanted. Your legs are weak now." Qingwan blushed, lowered her head, and followed Yizun obediently. Yizun walked up to Klaus, but before he could say anything, a bodyguard suddenly attacked and kicked Yizun down. Qingwan rushed over in fright, supported Yizun, and looked at Klaus in panic. "Sir, we don't know what we did wrong. You want to hurt my boyfriend." A bodyguard behind Klaus said, "How did you know the password to sneak into Mr. S study? Do you think you can fool us by putting on a reality show? Do you think we are fools?" "No, there was a power outage just now. I was afraid of the dark, so I dragged Yizun out with me, wanting to find someone to ask why the power outage occurred. But we didn't realize that this place was too big. It was our first time here, so we got lost and ended up here by accident. When we came in, the door was not locked. Su Qingwan's high education did not come for nothing. Telling lies within the truth makes it seem real, and she knows how to say it better than anyone else. Klaus gestured, search. Bodyguards immediately rushed in to grab Su Qingwan and Yi Zun and searched them carefully. Su Qingwan was very panicked. She didn't dare look at Yi Zun, fearing that her eyes would reveal it. After the search, the bodyguard said to Klaus, "Sir, we found nothing." "Take them out and shoot them," Klaus ordered. When the two were pulled out of the door, they saw Wang Qinshue wearing a man's clothes and running towards them barefoot. She ran fast, naked, and her graceful body was clearly visible under the light. Su Qingwan took a look and turned away. Wang Qinshue ran to Klaus and said, "Sir, this must be a misunderstanding. Please give them a chance to prove themselves." Klaus pulled Wang Qinshue's clothes up like a gentleman. "Since you have served me well, I will give them a chance. Someone, prepare the polygraph." Su Qingwan and Yi Zun were taken to take a lie detector test. Yi Zun arrived first and sat on a chair, with countless sophisticated instruments connected to his body. There are also professional lie detector experts, who may be small, but have all the necessary capabilities. Su Qingwan didn't dare to look at Yi Zun, for she was afraid that her worried look would be seen by others. Who is Yi Zun? If he fails the polygraph, will he die? They will die, both of them.